What's up, people? Welcome to the Hotep Jesus channel. Got a very, very special show for you tonight. Awesome debate on Bitcoin. We got BTC, Team BTC versus Team BSV. But before we get into the introductions of these gentlemen, I want to introduce myself. I'm Hotep Jesus. You probably saw me on the Joe Rogan show. Reason for this debate today is not entertainment. I don't have a dog in this race. I don't care about BTC or BSV. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want to learn. I want to understand what this argument is about. I want to learn more about crypto, blockchain, Bitcoin, you name it. I want to learn about it. Yes, this stream is sponsored by coinbitsapp.com. Yes, I'm going to show my app. I'm a goddamn capitalist. You better believe it. It's basically a dollar cost average model to purchase Bitcoin. Yes, I know if you don't own your keys, it's not your Bitcoin's custodial app. Yes, I know. I don't give a damn. But if you use our app, we will be able to grow and eventually get away from banks completely and allow you to own your keys, allow you to actually own your Bitcoin and hold it yourself. Shinobi, let me just get you back in here. I see you dropped out. Let me get you back in here, bro. So without further ado, Peter McCormack, you can go ahead and start the introductions and then we'll just go around the room.
Yeah, hi. I'm Peter McCormack. I'm the host of the What Bitcoin Did podcast and the host of the Defiance podcast. I'm known as being a bit of an untechnical moron who likes to ask simple questions. So, yeah, that's me.
Kurt, I guess you can go next.
Sure. I'm Kurt from CryptoTradersPro.com. I've been a Bitcoiner since 2012. I've been a miner in the Bitcoin space and the altcoin space. I'm currently a fundamental analyst for a trading and investment group out of the United States with offices in Europe and Australia. I have been a big blocker since 2015, and that has led me down a whole wild path that's landed me in BSV, who has the biggest blocks in the entire cryptocurrency space.
When you guys talk about these blocks, it sounds like you guys are discussing dick size. But anyway, Connor, go ahead.
My name's Connor. I run a YouTube channel called Bitcoin and Beyond, and currently building a verified review platform on top of Bitcoin SV.
Okay, awesome, cool. Looks like Shinobi's having a bit of technical difficulties, so I guess we should go ahead and.
You guys hear me?
Wait, say that again? Oh, is that him?
You guys hear me clear or breaking up?
Is that Shinobi talking?
It is.
All right, hold on, let me get him back in there. My fault. I got you back. Say something, Shinobi.
What's up, everybody? So I do a much smaller podcast with a few friends than Peter's called Block Digest. Other than that, I am a pretty private person, and I've been in the space a while and like to think I know what I'm talking about. So I guess we'll see if that holds up.
Awesome. So just so the chat knows, we're going to go ahead and excuse me, we're going to go ahead and have a about 2-minute opening argument. We're going to start with Team BTC, and then we're going to let the Team BSV go. So you guys can start now.
All right. Well, I don't know where Shinobi is, and I'm probably the last person people wanted to debate on behalf of Bitcoin. It's very simple for me. Bitcoin's like, if you think of a technology pitch, it's always what's the problem, what's the solution. The problem that Bitcoin solves is censorship-resistant money. Therefore, it needs to be decentralized, as decentralized as possible. You've got to avoid any opportunity for the governments to switch it off. Therefore, block sizes need to be kept small so we can run as many nodes as possible. That's why BTC is king. Any of this stuff to do with BSV, which is just a follow-up to BCH, has been proven time and time again that nobody cares, nobody's interested. Big block sizes means more centralization, which ultimately means it won't be censorship resistant. So yeah. Plus, it's completely backed by an absolute moron, a liar, and a fraud called Craig Wright.
Shinobi, hold on, let me get you back in there. Can you say something, please, bro?
Yeah. I mean, Peter did a pretty good job there. I mean, really, the only thing I'd go into a little deeper is, Bitcoin really at the end of the day is just a database. Like the only thing special about Bitcoin is how that database is updated. It's still just a database. And so the whole logic behind Bitcoin is we all have our own copy of the database and a way to
Yeah, we're just gonna have to
verify
rock it without
how
him
it's
then.
Oh no, he's there. He's talking.
Right.
You can't hear him, Peter?
No, I
But-
can't hear him.
I can hear him.
I hear Shinobi
Can,
fine.
can you hear me, Hotep?
All right, so I'm gonna
I can
refresh
hear.
mine.
Everybody can hear him except for Peter. Peter, if you want to drop out, refresh,
Okay.
and just come back in.
All right. Well, pretty much though, the idea is we all have our own copy of this database, and the mechanism to update it and validate how it's updated is there. But that's useless if you can't actually check the whole database against everybody else's copy. I mean, in the simplest way possible, BSV's argument is just put it all in data centers. Well, what's the big phrase in everybody's head these days? There's no such thing as the cloud. It's just somebody else's computer. And when it's their computer, they can not tell you what's in that database. They can lie to you about what's in that database. If there's only a few people with it, they can collude and just violate the whole social consensus of how that database was supposed to work. And there's nothing you can do about it because the copy is so big, you can't get your own copy and then be like, no, we're going to go off in this direction now. So the whole game plan of BSV is just letting this database grow so big, you can never have your own copy. You can never check it fully. And you just trust the people who have it. And I mean, how does that form a politically neutral money?
Okay. BSV, you're on the clock.
All right. Well, fundamentally, BSV is the simplest version of the Bitcoin protocol. Now, the word Bitcoin is used by Satoshi to describe three things. He describes the network itself, he describes the node implementations, and he describes the chain tip or a coin. So the word Bitcoin can be those three things. Satoshi always used them interchangeably, which I think is the source of all of the confusion and all of the debate that's occurred in the entire scaling debate of Bitcoin that really started in 2014 or 2015. But what BSV believes is that the simplest version, the thing that nobody has tried, is Bitcoin itself. So what BSV posits is that big blocks allow more throughput, and that ultimately a 1 megabyte block is itself censorship. If you want to get into a block and you are simply unable to afford space in a 1 megabyte block, then you don't get to participate in BTC. That is a form of censorship. It's something that was predicted well before it occurred. However, the BTC community, the developers, they decided that didn't matter. What's more important is that things are able to run on the least common denominator software. And so we're in the middle of a debate. So while groups like Litecoin tried the 2.5 minute block, or Dash tried masternodes, and all these different coins tried all kinds of different things, what's funny is that nobody ever tried Bitcoin in its absolute simplest implementation. And BCH split away from BTC in 2017 in order to give that a shot and say, hey, you know what? This deserves to be tried how it is. And then BCH went a little wayward in that regard too, and tried to rethink things that didn't necessarily need to be rethought. And BSV split to continue the test and say, you know what? Let's just see if Satoshi was right before we bury him and say that he was wrong, because it's something that just simply hasn't been tried. So BSV is there trying to say, let's test Satoshi. Let's see if it works as originally implemented. And it was originally implemented without any block size limit, by the way. So that's where we're at.
And I'll just add on that Kurt is right that Satoshi Nakamoto created a founding document, the white paper, which I have right here for Peter and Shinobi to look at if they've never read it before. And he also has 2 years of email and forum posts. Okay. And what he described has absolutely nothing to do with anything that those talking points that Peter and Shinobi just talked about. So the whole point of BSV is actually that, as Kurt just mentioned, Bitcoin has never been tried as it was described by Satoshi. And I have a litany of quotes and even just the white paper itself that proves that. So all I'm going to just add on top of Kurt's is that, Satoshi Nakamoto wrote in 2008 that Bitcoin could scale larger than Visa today. He said that in 2009. Okay. And he also said that it never hits a scale ceiling. And so what they're going to try and tell all of us is that Bitcoin has a scaling problem because they think they know better than the creator of the system itself. And they're just making stuff up. And I can't think of two better people to represent the BTC side than someone who says he is ignorant on it and another anonymous person.
I've never said I'm ignorant. Actually, I just say I'm not very technical, and I try to represent the majority of people who are not technical or don't have experience in economics. And actually, I think that's why my show is the most downloaded show in Bitcoin, because I am trying to cover that. And most people do find a lot of this stuff challenging, and most of the time are patronized and condescended for asking simple questions. So, there's an audience for what I do, and I think it's because I represent them. So I think I understand my value in all of this. Okay, so my first question is who is Satoshi?
So Satoshi Nakamoto is a pseudonym that released Bitcoin, and he released a white paper in 2009 or 2008. Sorry.
No, I think
the system.
You misunderstood my question. Sorry.
No, sorry.
Is Craig right, Satoshi Nakamoto?
So this is a debate about Bitcoin. I'm actually happy to address that question at the end.
Hey, it's a yes or no question.
I think
is Craig.
If we could just let Connor answer the question.
Yeah,
he's not answering it though.
I will answer at the very end because I don't think you actually understand what Satoshi wrote. And so, for example, what you just said earlier, listen to me.
Peter, don't cut him off. Let him talk.
You. So,
but he's not answering the question. If we're going to do this, it's like debating a politician.
As your first warning, your second warning, I'll mute your mic.
Right, I will answer your question at the end of this debate. I promise. But I'm going to start and make sure you understand what Satoshi actually wrote. What she wrote specifically, that the intended configuration is not for every user to run their own node. So Satoshi Nakamoto completely contradicts everything you guys just said in your
Connor, you're not answering the question.
You're not even answering the question.
Connor, I got this. You gotta let me moderate.
Right,
let me moderate. Connor, you gotta answer the question. He said, "Who is Satoshi Nakamoto? Is it Craig Wright or not?"
Yeah, Craig Wright created Bitcoin, undeniably.
How do you know that?
Okay, so I've had many private conversations with him. There's a litany of historic. So Craig Wright actually went to the Australian.
You spoke to Craig Wright, or you spoke to Satoshi?
Craig Wright. Craig Wright went to the Australian tax office in 2009 and told them, I've been mining Bitcoin since January of 2009. This is all public evidence. So Craig Wright must be the stupidest person on the planet to lie about mining Bitcoins and have the entire Australian tax office come after him. He must be the biggest long con fraud.
So is there proof to show that he was mining Bitcoin then?
Well, there's proof that he went to the Australian tax office and said that he was.
Well, he said that he was. Is there proof that he was actually doing the mining though?
At the time, there was about 6 to 8 people that were participating in Bitcoin at all. So the fact that he was able to even say that Bitcoin was a thing on a tax document is itself, it puts him in the first dozen or fewer people that would have participated at all. So
okay, so there's a plausible argument.
But notice how we're getting away from Satoshi Nakamoto and what he actually wrote. Craig Wright aligns with everything Satoshi ever wrote about Bitcoin. And that's why Peter doesn't like him. That's why Shinobi doesn't like him, is because everything that Craig Wright talks about is what Satoshi Nakamoto wrote about Bitcoin.
All right, I want to hear from Kurt now.
I mean, I'd say that frankly, 100%, we don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is. Like, I agree with Craig about Bitcoin, and that's why I'm here. Whether or not he's Satoshi Nakamoto, it's the same as saying, like, well, did Jesus Christ exist? Like, well, shoot. I mean, there's been 2,000 years of discussion about, well, yeah, and here's all this evidence that Jesus was there, and here's where he was buried, and here's all this stuff. And you have a whole group of people that say, no, it's impossible, and here's the reasons why. And ultimately, there's a billion people on one side that believe that he was real, and there's a billion people on the other side or more that say he wasn't. And this is one of those things. Like, Craig Wright has provided all kinds of evidence toward it. He won't give the one piece of evidence that everybody says is absolutely necessary. And frankly, I don't blame him, because here's the thing. Craig Wright in 2015 was doxxed by Wired Magazine and Gizmodo. This is what I remember occurring. All of a sudden, there's this guy who got kicked out of Australia, was allegedly Satoshi Nakamoto, and he's on the run. There's this whole, it starts this whole wild goose chase of who is Satoshi and is Satoshi Craig Wright. And at the end of the day, he proved himself to Gavin Andresen, who was the head of Bitcoin Core at the time, John Matonis, who was the head of the Bitcoin Foundation at the time, and Ian Grigg, who is one of the most respected cryptographers of the last generation. And
Okay.
and then all of these people lost positions. So Gavin Andresen lost his job. He got his GitHub keys revoked. John Matonis was marginalized. In fact, the entire Bitcoin Foundation was marginalized after that time period. And then Ian Grigg decided to not make things public because he saw what was occurring there. So at that point, assuming Craig Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto and seeing the consequences of proving himself to the people who would care the most, the people who could prove him wrong the easiest, and seeing this massive backlash from the small block community, the other developers in that situation, well, I would recalibrate too. And so we've seen a recalibration. We've seen Craig change his narrative to say, you know what? I need to protect myself first, and I'm gonna protect myself by establishing the legal ownership of Bitcoin. I'll let you go. I'll go 20 more seconds here. So he has to protect what he has, and he has to establish that legally. He needs to have the world understand the property rights that exist in Bitcoin in order to protect himself from having his coins hard forked away or soft forked away by people that have clearly said that they're his enemy. Now, I know he's brash and he's unlikable, and therefore people don't want him to be.
That's cool. All right. I'm going to cut you off right there. Shinobi, what you got to say?
Okay. First of all, you said he proved to Gavin who he is. You don't know that. You were not there. You have nothing but Gavin's word. And circumstantially, the entire situation with that is Gavin was handed a laptop, brand new, that he'd never seen before, and software was loaded on that to verify a signature that he never checked or verified himself. And the software used was Electrum. The maintainer of Electrum verified that no of the official Electrum wallet from their server took place the day that happened. So the software validating that did not come from the official Electrum website. Secondly, the entire situation regarding the Bitcoin Foundation is irrelevant. And thirdly, Gavin's commit access being revoked, not only did he himself say, stop making a deal out of this, stop trying to distort this. This was a reasonable thing for the other developers to do, given the situation surrounding Craig and his claim with that. And he did not ask for it back. And as another note, he had slowly been actually committing less and less code and being less and less involved with the development process for about a year preceding that. So pretty much everything you just did to summarize history completely distorted the actual history.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Connor, I'm going to cut you. I'm not going to let you speak because that's all we're going to talk about on this
Perfect
Nakamoto Craig Wright thing, because nobody
disagree.
wants to hear about it, right?
Actually,
what we're going to do is we're going to save that for the end, and I want to hear some more technical things. Let's talk Bitcoin. Let's talk block sizes. Let's talk crypto. Let's get down to the techie tech stuff.
So if I would like to actually ask them a question now. So they asked us a question.
Okay.
So Satoshi Nakamoto was very clear that you scale Bitcoin on chain. He was very clear that every user does not run a node. He was very clear that simplified payment verification was the way that users would interact with the blockchain. He was very clear that nodes would specialize into server farms. And he was also very clear that the Bitcoin scripting language was a predicate language that allows for complex transactions. So why do you guys support BTC, which completely flies in the face of everything that Satoshi Nakamoto wanted for Bitcoin?
Because Satoshi is irrelevant.
I have a lot to address there.
Can I just throw something in?
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna let's lead with McCormack.
Yeah, so Satoshi's not relevant anymore. Just completely irrelevant. Left the project in 2011. The people who've worked on it since then have worked on it for 8+ years. They're closer to the project. They're closer to the code. They're closer to everything. Satoshi is not relevant. Harping back to what he said is actually disingenuous by you, because you're putting words in his mouth and you're actually stating what you think he would want now, what you think he would believe.
Those are quotes.
That is, no, but it's
disingenuous. Quotes.
But it's disingenuous to attribute to him that his position wouldn't change. So even me as a moron knows that he had a lot of help in the early days from Hal Finney. He got things wrong. I've been through the old chat logs. I've seen the things he got wrong. But he's not relevant anymore. He left the project. The only people who are relevant to the project now are the people who still exist and the people who are working on it.
So
I
before
don't give a fuck what he said.
Okay, so before Shinobi answers, can I just read these Satoshi quotes so that everyone listening has context? Is that okay?
Go ahead.
So Satoshi Nakamoto wrote, "The current system where every user is a network node is not the intended configuration for large scale. That would be like every Usenet user runs their own NNTP server. The design supports letting users just be users. The more burden it is to run a node, the fewer nodes there will be. Those few nodes will be big server farms. The rest will be client nodes that only do transactions and don't generate." That's one quote. Another quote would be very simple. "So long before the network gets anywhere near as large as that," responding to someone talking about the block size getting larger, "it would be safe for users to use simplified payment verification," which is in section 8 of the white paper, "which only requires having the chain of block headers." Now, he then goes on to say, "Mining would be left more and more to specialists with server farms or specialized hardware. A server farm would only need to have one node on the network and the rest connect with a LAN." So, Peter, you're talking about that Satoshi Nakamoto. So you think the creator of Bitcoin knows less? The person who actually created and designed the system, his thoughts about the system are irrelevant? Because that's just one of the stupidest things I've ever heard.
Well, yes, I think right now, the opinion of somebody that was written 8 years ago, way before lots of things come in, ASICs have come in, lots of different things have come in, I think it's completely irrelevant. I think the only opinions that matter right now are people who've got skin in the game who are working on the project, because you cannot attribute these things to him as something he would hold as true now. You've got no idea what that person would believe. So you should stand up for what you believe and base your own arguments, not based them on something that was written 10 years ago. It's just irrelevant.
Well, we're talking about two different things. The fact of the matter is that software is always wrong. Like, software is not done. Bitcoin is not done. And I think we can all agree to that there's bug bounties and all of these things for a reason. However, what you're saying, Peter, it sounds like you're saying that Bitcoin is, I think we lost Peter.
He's probably refreshing. He'll be right back.
So Peter, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So it sounds like what you're saying, like, if software is never complete, software is never done. So software is always a little bit wrong, right?
Yeah.
But it sounds like what you're saying is that Satoshi was fundamentally wrong about Bitcoin, so that Satoshi's opinion on Bitcoin was fundamentally flawed and has been taken over by people who fundamentally understand Bitcoin better?
No, not saying that at all. How can you say fundamentally and then have it aligned to the whole of Bitcoin? You can't.
Do you
You're
mind
talking
if I
about
hop
aspects
in?
of Bitcoin.
Well, are there?
You're cherry picking
are
and
there,
choosing.
are there fundamental truths?
Let Shinobi hop in real quick.
Sure.
All right, sorry if this is going to be dense, but
He's
there's
muted,
really
is
a
he?
lot to respond to.
Can't hear him.
But the first thing is, when you were talking about users only transacting and not generating, node is referring to miner. And actually, in the SPV situation, he specifically said businesses might want to run whole nodes to verify things more securely and quickly. Now, as well, the block size issue, that is something his opinion evolved on. The last comment Satoshi made on the block size was when BitDNS, the predecessor to Namecoin, was first proposed as something built directly on Bitcoin. And his response was no. Separate things need separate blockchains, because you cannot just dump all of the cost into one system. And his last word
That's not what he wrote.
was users might become increasingly tyrannical about restricting the block size so it can be validated by many small devices. And lastly, the SPV system, there was a mention in the white paper of a node alert to invalidate you of an invalid block. Well, here's the situation there. You need to prove a negative. So like, imagine you have a town with hundreds of thousands of rocks tied to a string that goes to a pole in the middle of the town. Now, I can hand you one of those rocks on a string, and you can follow it to the pole and prove this rock connects to the pole. But doing that does not prove that some other rock is not tied to that pole. To prove that a specific other rock is not connected to that pole, you have to follow each and every string connected to that pole and make sure every single thing at the end of it is not the specific other rock. Otherwise, it doesn't prove it's in there. So the whole node alert to prove that a block is invalid without the entire chain to validate against was something he assumed would be part of SPV. That not only was never developed, it might not even be possible.
I should also say that given everything that people know about Satoshi, do you think he would use the word tyrannical as a positive and say that he's hoping that people become tyrannical about block size?
Really quick, that is like, this is something I get into a lot because people focus on that word, but they forget that the whole context of that phrase was him telling people, do not put all of this stuff on the blockchain because users might want to keep it small. So the whole context of that is do not do this thing, because if the users want to keep the block space small, they should be able to do that. That's their choice. It was deferential to the users in the way that he put that.
I think Connor would like to clarify the quote, and I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, so you're completely misrepresenting his quote, and I actually have it up. But there's two things I want to respond to. So number one is BitDNS. So have you ever heard of the opcode opver? It's op version. So you can actually create separate versions. So you can actually have nodes that have nothing to do with Bitcoin that are running Bitcoin software that are on a separate that are using a separate version.
So you're talking about merge mining?
Yes. And he said specifically
that's separating the blockchains. That is keeping the Bitcoin blockchain a completely different blockchain than the Namecoin one, so that if all I want to do is use Bitcoin, I don't have to care about the Namecoin shit. Like, keep that out of the Bitcoin blockchain is what he said.
Sure. Okay, but you're building that on top of Bitcoin. It's like a layered system. So you end up with an onion type system.
You're connecting it to Bitcoin, but you're connecting it to Bitcoin in a way where I don't have to care about it if I'm just a Bitcoin user. If you try to put it in the Bitcoin blocks, I have to deal with it whether I want to use it or not.
So, okay, but before we even get into the details of any of this, why do you think Satoshi Nakamoto wrote that the current system where every user is a network node is not the intended configuration for large scale? That flies directly in the face of everything that you're talking about. Because
he was talking about mining and people generating new coins and earning fees, not people who have a copy of the blockchain so they can fully validate things. In the white paper itself, he said businesses will probably want to run nodes, as in the copy of the blockchain, so they can fully validate the money they're getting paid selling their goods and services.
And to my knowledge, when Satoshi used the word node, it never meant anything but a miner. At the time, all nodes mined.
It was an evolving term over those first couple of years. But yes, there is a gray area to debate there.
I would agree that it's a gray area at best.
I would say it's absolutely not a gray area because there's section 6 of the white paper titled network, or 5, sorry, and it says the steps to run the network are as follows. And it says new transactions are broadcast to all nodes. Each node collects new transactions into a block. Each node works on finding a difficult proof of work for its block. When a node finds a proof of work, it broadcasts the block to all nodes. This is all in the white paper. This was described when Satoshi released the system. This is what...
Yes, but that white paper is just, one, it's just a beta thing. And two, when he wrote that white paper and dropped the original code, there was no separation of anything. The wallet to spend money, the miner to mine Bitcoin, the thing to verify the whole blockchain was all just in a single piece of software. It didn't get specialized yet. But whole time from there, we've broken those pieces into separate modular software.
But he was so kind to us in giving us a fundamental definition of the word. So he gave us the word, and then he fundamentally defined it. And therefore,
okay. Do you want to? Are you okay with raising the coin limit, because he didn't define a coin limit in the white paper. He didn't define the opcodes or the scripting system. So many core fundamental things of Bitcoin only dropped in the first version of code are not even mentioned in the white paper. Not even hinted at. This is something we need to think about.
So, and this is the good news. So this is actually the good news for people like Peter and everyone else in the world. So Bitcoin's innovation is not a technical innovation. So, for example, there's a book. Have you ever read this book? It's written in 2003 by a guy named Peter Weiner. It's called Policing Online Games. And it describes very specifically creating a digital currency for online gaming that uses a chain of digital signatures. So a blockchain-based money was described 6 years before Bitcoin was released. Okay. The innovation of Bitcoin, listen to me real quick. The innovation of Bitcoin is an economic innovation. It's the use of economics to provide security to a network. And that's what the white paper describes. So the reason why people are find the white paper so important in BSV is because you actually start to realize, oh, wow, this white paper describes a competitive mining network that produces an ultimately secure system that can scale because you're economically incentivized to scale. And that's what BSV is doing right now. It's scaling rapidly. Bitcoin itself is an economic innovation. It's not a technical innovation. People say that blockchain was invented by Satoshi Nakamoto, which is just patently false.
I'll tell you right now you're wrong, and I'll tell you exactly why you're wrong. The key innovation of Bitcoin was the difficulty adjustment. That is a technical development. That is a technical thing. All of the pieces of Bitcoin were in, like, proof of work was invented multiple times over the past couple of decades. There was BitGold by Nick Szabo, the BDIes project. The key innovation of Bitcoin was the technical innovation of changing the difficulty dynamically so that more proof of work being done, more miners coming online, didn't just exponentially increase the inflation rate into infinity. That was the one key innovation of Bitcoin, and that is absolutely a technical innovation.
So you think that the key innovation of Bitcoin is the difficulty adjustment?
Yes, that's a fact.
Cool.
Why?
We'll disagree there. Yeah.
Because every other piece of Bitcoin literally existed for decades. The difficulty adjustment was the one piece that glued all of those separate things together and actually made it work. So public key cryptography existed. The idea of linking like individual pieces of data in a tamper-proof way together existed. The idea of digitized cash existed. All of these things existed except the difficulty adjustment. That was the one thing nobody figured out before Bitcoin.
Then how is Bitcoin a solution to the Byzantine generals problem?
It's not. It's just a probabilistic thing that gets close enough that it doesn't matter. The Bitcoin blockchain right now, any blockchain using proof of work, there is no guarantee that the block at the tip right now is going to stay there. It's just a very high probability. It's 90%, then 95, then 98, then 99, 99.9999, and so on. It never hits 100. It doesn't actually solve the problem. It just gets close enough we can actually use it.
We haven't heard from Peter. He raised his hand. What you got to say, Peter?
Just a little thing. So one of the most important things that comes out of this is after this debate, both Bitcoin and Bitcoin SV will still exist, right? They'll both be there. Anybody who's listening in, like yourself, Hotep, who's unsure about the two technologies, wonders why they exist, has the ability to go and use either one they want. So both will, with both BSV and Bitcoin, you will be able to buy coins, send coins. I think we can all agree they both work to a certain extent, okay? But long term, you have to kind of place a bet and you have to kind of put your judgment with it. So there's a few things that, like, I'm not a technical person. It's fully well known. I said it over and over again. So what I do is I put my trust in experts and people I trust, people I read and listen to their talks and their interviews. And I say, okay, I believe you. I can trust you. I think I trust that project. But there's a few like strong signals for me for BSV. So these are the things that are really important for me that send me very, very strong signals. Firstly, I would just ask Connor and Kurt, how many protocol developers are working on Bitcoin SV right now?
Okay,
it's just a question. Please don't do your politician answer. Just answer the question.
Probably 15.
No, 0. So I've been working with a data analytics company. If you go into the commits, and I can actually share out the commits. If you go into GitHub, there's 0 commits right now on the protocol. There's nobody working on the protocol.
There's literally been multiple network upgrades. Who's doing these?
Nobody's working on Bitcoin SV.
Literally nobody. They have made it through some membrane into reality.
There's nobody right now in the last quarter working on the Bitcoin. It's on GitHub. You can see it. There's 0 commits. So I'm just going to say these are my signals. Nobody is working on it.
Okay, so Peter's argument here is that there's nobody working on the core development of BSV. What do you guys have to say to that?
Okay, well,
it's just false.
It's number one, it's just completely false, number one. But number two, it's actually, it's more interesting point. Okay, so there's a quote by Frederick Hayek that everyone in Bitcoin loves to talk about. In 1984, he said that we'll never have a good money again until we take it out of the hands of government. Okay, So everyone in Bitcoin is so happy that we've done that. But what we've done is we've handed control of our money over to centralized developer groups. So Peter is actually, he's tying the value of Bitcoin to a group of developers that can debase the asset. I mean, literally every single protocol developer is a threat to debase the asset, the underlying asset. Okay. So the number of protocol developers is not a useful thing in Bitcoin, because what you actually want is nobody touching the protocol. That is the entire point of Bitcoin. Okay, but you're just making things up, Peter.
No, I'm not. Go on GitHub now. I went on beforehand.
Yeah,
I employed researchers. I worked with the researchers. We went on GitHub. There is 0 people working on the protocol. So it's not a lie.
Software development can happen in places other than GitHub. That's what you don't understand clearly. Okay, so people that work in software know this. It's a very simple thing. But I want to get back, please, can I get back to what Shinobi was talking about? So the reason why Bitcoin is an economic innovation is because it uses economics to solve the Byzantine generals problem. That's the entire point. It's miners are competing.
Well, Connor, you said that already. You said that already. You got
but listen, the reason why this is very important is because what BTC has done is they've told miners, we're going to give you a production quota. You are not allowed to produce a block bigger than 1 megabyte. What they're essentially doing is centrally planning the system. Hayek wrote about this, I mean, in depth. Central planning is essentially telling the market what that they can do. What BTC is doing is telling individual miners, the people that were written about in the white paper, you may not produce a block bigger than this. They're telling them you may not work longer than 2 hours a day. It's completely centrally planned, and it has no basis in economic reality.
That does not reflect reality at all. That code sitting on GitHub does nothing sitting on GitHub. A person has to choose to download it and run it and keep it running. There is no central planning in that block size limit. It is every single Bitcoin user who is choosing to run that software with that limit and choose to value the software with that limit that enforce that limit. That is a market. That is a market system arriving at this limit by every individual user choosing to run it. That code in GitHub doesn't do anything. Like, do you think the core developers come into my house and shove a gun in my face and go, upgrade to this code? No, I choose to. You can't make me run that code. There is no central planning there. There's market participants making their choices.
So Connor, your argument is that Bitcoin is centralized, and Shinobi saying it's not centralized.
No, I'm saying it's centrally planned by the Bitcoin core developers, and I'm saying that everyone in BTC trusts the Bitcoin core developers to know what's best for Bitcoin.
I don't. You can go on my Twitter right now and see me shout down core developers all the time, tell them their proposals are stupid. There is no blind trust in the core developers.
And you're getting
assess for themselves.
But you're getting back to the same. You just talked about users downloading the software running it. The current system where every user is a network node is not the intended configuration. So
I already addressed that earlier.
I'm
not going to keep readdressing things over and over.
You haven't addressed it. This is the entire problem.
Yes, I did. I told you he's speaking to the mining equipment, not just the copy of the blockchain, as well. But his changing opinion on the block size, the lack of a fraud proof to prove something is invalid when you don't have the whole chain. I literally gave you multiple reasons leading together to explain why that is not a properly interpreted statement, just taking it literally and applying it to the current day. But, so I'm not gonna keep rehashing the same point
because you don't like to admit that in section 5 of the white paper, a node is very specifically defined. It's very specifically defined, and that's what everyone in BTC doesn't like to admit. The entire system was designed.
Hold on, guys. You're getting redundant right now. Put me to sleep. I got a $4.99 super chat from N1 Play 5. He says the white paper is a beta ? Explain then why you cannot build layers like OSI.
I think all implementations of Bitcoin are plainly beta. There's a reason we're not at 1.0 on any implementation on any blockchain, period. We're having a debate, not just here, but we're having a debate consistently with value and hash power, and these are long-term implementations. And I think until we get to the point where we're saying, okay, here's a 1.0 version of a Bitcoin implementation, then I think that debate is really open. I think that's the actual value of this conversation here. Is
Did you
that
seriously just say that? Like, so if the next core release says 1.0, the debate's over.
No, you're taking it too literally. I'm saying that I think any rational software developer would look at any implementation of Bitcoin and say that these are beta implementations of an idea.
But see, that's not like. See, you are distorting those words. BSV is not.
Those are my words.
Bitcoin. The word implementation of Bitcoin. BSV is not an implementation of Bitcoin. It's an implementation of Bitcoin SV. It is a different system, a different chain. And another implementation of Bitcoin is Bitcoin Knots, the one Luke Deshir maintains on his own, in addition to contributing to Bitcoin Core, or BTC Go, a client written in Golang. BCH, BSV are not implementations of Bitcoin. They are implementations of a different system that broke away from Bitcoin.
No, BTC is an implementation of a system that was never, ever described by the creator of Bitcoin.
Who's not relevant anymore.
Right. The creator of the system that no one understands is not relevant anymore. Yes.
It's not relevant when you're going to attribute things to his thinking without that person there to defend their point or argue their point. It's absolutely ridiculous and disingenuous to use somebody else's work and represent it for them. You've got no idea what their opinion is now. You've got no idea how their opinion changed. Satoshi didn't go on Bitcoin Talk and just demand things. He went on to discuss things with people. He worked with people. There were people. Hal Finney contributed. He didn't know every answer. So for you to sit there and you represent what you think Satoshi meant and what he would think now is absolutely disingenuous.
So I think we would just like to try Satoshi and figure out if he was right, because it's never actually been tried. That's what I think.
And you're trying it, and nobody's using it.
No, and so it actually works very well. So anyone can build applications on top of Bitcoin. You can send BSV with less than a fraction of a penny of a cent, which Bitcoin Core will never, ever do, so long as they never raise the block size, which, as far as I can tell, will never happen.
Can we jump, or not fully jump to another topic, kind of move a little bit into the
Hold on one second before we go to what you're about to say, Shinobi. Crypto Paradigm, $10 super chat. He says Craig Wright is a fraud.
Yes.
Shinobi, go ahead, bro.
But you brought up building applications on BSV, and this is another thing that is completely disconnected from reality, and it goes back to one of the first things I said. There is no such thing as the cloud. It's somebody else's computer. And the stuff that I see talked about building apps on BSV, it's like you think you're going to build Facebook, Netflix, YouTube, like Google, all these things on one blockchain that a node has to keep all of to validate everything. That's delusional. Like Hotep, I'm sure you're kind of familiar. YouTube is not a profitable business. Streaming video like that, they do not make money. They barely break even. So, like, in what world do you think just shoving all this stuff on the blockchain, air quote, magically makes it immutable or censorship resistant or impossible for a government to shut down? It's data sitting in a hard drive somewhere that somebody can go unplug or blow up or delete. Like, a blockchain is not magic. It's a database.
But that's all data everywhere. Like, there is a way to kill all data everywhere, period.
And
no, but you're missing the point. Like, what do you think is going to happen if you shove all of this stuff on the BSV blockchain? Look at the size of the data centers that Google runs, that Facebook runs, that
exactly.
Netflix runs.
Exactly.
And think about all of that shit has to fit in one company's thing.
No.
Like how do you think there's going to be more than a few data centers where either the countries they sit in just get together and decide all the rules based on what they want, or hell, America just goes and bombs any copy of it in another country, and then we have the only one? Like, think things through.
No, well, again, you just described Satoshi's vision for Bitcoin at scale, which was large server farms distributed across the world. And you just said, think about Google, think about Netflix. Hang on. You just said, think about Google, think about Netflix, think about Amazon. You just listed a ton of companies that have infrastructure to handle a large blockchain.
That take that much effort for a government to shut down. And also, you just kind of twisted my words. Because Satoshi's comment on data centers was miners, not the blockchain.
who are the ones that hold the blockchain. So miners are the ones that hold the blockchain, which is, again, the entire point of Bitcoin, which is what you are refusing to accept. But moving past that, okay, so again, read the white paper, section 5 of the white paper. It's all described there, okay? Now, moving forward, okay? So again, miners, so the good thing is that I actually don't have to care what you think about what miners are willing to accept into the blockchain. That's the whole point of having a market economy. It means that if I make a transaction, I attach a fee to it. If a miner decides they're going to include it in the blockchain, they will say, yes, that fee is enough, or no, that fee is not enough. That's all that they need to do. That's the best part about Bitcoin. It means that I can either make transactions or build businesses that attach a fee, and then miners will put it into the blockchain. It's an economically incentivized network. And it means that I'm making the block.
Pools do.
Correct. Which are miners. Correct. Which are miners.
Mining pools are not miners. For me to run a mining pool, I don't actually have to have any mining equipment or anything. I just run up a server with a copy of the blockchain, and the people with the actual mining equipment connect to it. And I just tell them what to mine on, and they have no clue what they're mining on. And they have no say in that, because we have completely disconnected the housing of the blockchain from the people who actually run the mining equipment these days. They're not the same thing. They're two different people. And having a giant data center node makes the miners subservient to that completely, and not just economically, in the sense that if I refuse to accept a miner's block as valid, I'm not going to give him money. It's worth nothing to me. But literally, miners don't have a copy of the blockchain to even try to start again or fork away, because it's so huge.
Okay, so can I throw another thing in here?
Go ahead, Peter. Sure.
So I want to throw stuff in that I think is more relevant, again, to people like Hotep and people who'll be speaking to, because this technical stuff, it just goes over people's heads. Like you can argue it over and over. I think it's very, very important to focus on the people who are actually running this project and involved in it. So there's not a single credible person, technically credible person, who worked on Bitcoin, who's now working on BSV. That must tell you something. Why is not a single credible person? There has not a single credible person moved across. Okay, everybody. Peter, can I just finish without you interrupting? We talked about
just making things up.
No, I'm not making stuff up. Answer at the end. Okay, there's not a single credible person. Just because they work on BSV doesn't mean they're credible. There's no credible person. Not a single person like Szabo, Wille, Adam Back. Not a single person.
How do you define if somebody's credible or not?
Yeah, that was going to be my response.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I guess there's nobody with a very historical deep history in Bitcoin that's moved across to BSV, apart from Daniel Krauwitz, who's got some kind of history, but is clearly also a moron.
So you should interview Steve Shatters. Have you heard of Steve Shatters?
I'm not going to interview Steve Shatters because I don't cover BSV.
He's been in Bitcoin way longer than you've ever been in Bitcoin, and he understands Bitcoin way better than you do.
Okay. So one of the things is they keep going on about Satoshi, and one of the up front of this, people said, "Oh, I don't want you to go on about Craig Wright," but then they keep referring back to Satoshi and Satoshi's vision in the white paper, and so Craig Wright's highly relevant to this. So let's deal with this head on. Firstly, Connor believes that Craig Wright is Satoshi. Okay, I don't think Kurt does. I actually think Kurt doesn't believe he is. I think it's pretty obvious he doesn't. It's an embarrassment, and it proves the absolute stupidity of the people that we're dealing with, because repeatedly it's been debunked. Okay, he has been proven time and time again to be forging documents, backdating documents, unable to change the metadata. He has been in a court of law. He was called a fraud. He was told he committed perjury. What I don't understand with these people is, like, how many fake attempts and how many lies does one person have to tell before you realize this person is a fraud? And the fact that they cannot see fraud, the fact that this website with page upon page
in here, we got a bunch of super chats, and I really don't want to hear about Craig Wright. JP $5 super chat. He says Connor can't talk about trusting devs. BSV is one company owning all patents, all development, most mining. BTC is worldwide.
I'll talk that.
And one play 5. I'm going to read them all. You guys can talk about afters. And one play 5 $4.99 super chat. It says 1 megabyte. Where does the expansion come from? Why are big blocks useless? Kuji Beats $20 Canada dollars. CSW is Satoshi. Riku, $10. He says, Connor, could you please start thinking for yourself and stop quoting things out of context? Give us one critical argument of your own. Thank you very much. Raul Duke, $2. He said, boom, baby. Julio Maciera, he said, Juka, BSV is the future. And Katie Russian, $6.15 says, just stack sats. And one play again. Peter has zero reason to be here. Laugh my ass off. Useless.
Just have the biggest podcast in the space.
Real quick, I don't advocate for people ever, not in a debate scenario or anything. If I go and put my name attached to absolutely anybody, that puts me in a precarious situation. So this is not about what I believe about a person, period. I like I said, I agree with Craig Wright about Bitcoin. I agree with the big block narrative, period. I've been a big blocker since 2015, and that's where I'm at. It's the only reason I'm here. I happen to have a minor personal relationship with Craig Wright a little bit, but I don't know that I would call him a friend necessarily, but I don't think that's relevant to the conversation. But I also want to say that if we're talking about credibility of devs, this requires us being able to audit the capability of devs. And I don't know who actually has that credibility. So frankly, I'd like to say that anybody that is not writing their own implementation of code is trusting someone somewhere, and you have to have an ability to audit that code and run it yourself, and which is something I think Shinobi is doing. So I will credit him there for knowing what he believes and why. But I think there's a level of trust that's coming from absolutely all of us. So whether Peter, if you want to trust Jameson Lopp or Greg Maxwell, I think that's totally fair. I think it's reasonable. And much the same way, I trusted guys like, Jeff Garzik back in the day, or Gavin Andreessen when they were putting out, these things back then. I've since learned, going into it, I actually mined with BU for about 2 weeks before I realized I didn't like the implementation at the time. And that's something that, we all have to do. So for any of us to say authoritatively that one group of developers is credible and one is not, really is a very unreasonable thing unless you are
well, can I respond to that real quick?
Yeah.
Like the key thing is the group of developers, not individual developers. And the credibility of that doesn't come from auditing the skills or capabilities of any one developer. It's quite frankly just the number of developers, because that's the number of people checking each other. That's the number of people being skeptical towards each other's proposals and ideas and different attitudes about things that keeps a very hyper skeptical attitude about everything that catches all of the shit, or most of the shit, before it falls through the cracks. And if it's not about this guy is smart or that guy is dumb, it's about how many people there are like keeping each other in check. And there's not really any other coins out there. Seriously, the only two coins I can think of that have a dev community like that are Ethereum and Monero. And I think in Ethereum's case, we can see they're still fucking.
What are these dev communities doing? Like, what's their job?
Just like thinking through
they don't have
the effects of actually like changing something. Like here's an instance I'll give you, Hotep, a concrete example. Multi-sig with Bitcoin, like the way you can lock a coin so you need more than one key to spend it. Well, the way it works right now is you literally have every individual public key in that multi-sig in the transaction. Like each of those keys has to have a separate signature in the transaction, and that makes those transactions way bigger and way more expensive. Well,
so who's the authority that makes decisions, that makes the final decision as to who is us? Like, because
the people who run it. I mean, it's like, put it this way:
I know miners, right? I know miners, right? I know people who have mining farms, and do they have a say so on how this thing happens? Like, who
just like a series?
You can go ahead and you can change Bitcoin.
Nobody, and I'll walk you through why it's nobody. Like the developers together decide what they put in the code. Okay. And like they listen to people.
Do they vote? Like
there's the International Engineering Task Force. It's one of the biggest like nonprofit bodies that works on internet standards. And they have a concept called rough consensus. And the way this works is it has nothing to do with how many people agree or disagree with something. It's how many people have a good argument against something. And you can have a single person that has a good argument against something, and then you don't have consensus. But at the same time, you could have 50 people that are arguing against something, but all of the arguments are refuted, and you have consensus there. So it's not about like voting or people. But
Right.
the idea is like that gets into the code. And then, like I said earlier, people have to choose to run it. Like the miners have to choose to run it. Businesses have to choose to run it. Users have to choose to run it. And ultimately, it's just this organic thing that either happens or it doesn't. Like
Let me
somebody.
hear from Connor.
So I guess there's a few things to address there, but Hotep, I'll address you actually, because I think you brought up some really good questions, right? Now, if Bitcoin's entire thesis is to take the power out of money, why would we want to hand the power out of money to developer groups? In fact, every developer I know leans socialist. Okay. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is that when Satoshi Nakamoto released Bitcoin, he said the core design was set in stone, meaning that the rules are not supposed to be changed. In BTC, you actually need to be concerned that someone like Peter Todd, who's talking about inflating Bitcoin, you need to actually keep up with this dev community to tell you whether your asset is going to be debased. The entire thesis of Bitcoin SV is to do what Satoshi said, which is lock the protocol down to the way it was when it was released. And that means when I put my metaphorical Bitcoin under the mattress, it won't be debased by a third party. This was the entire problem Bitcoin was meant to solve. And what Shinobi is telling you is you as a user that cares about sound money need to be concerned about what some developer community, I wonder what a community is, right? That votes, right?
Communist.
Exactly, precisely. And that's exactly what everything else in this cryptocurrency world is. It's lean socialist and communist because they essentially want to take power out of government and hand it over to these decentralized developer groups. That sounds fantastic. Yeah, I'm all for that. Yeah.
Shinobi, can you respond to that?
Yeah, actually, and then at the end, I didn't finish that multi-sig comment, so I want to come back to that too.
Okay.
But at no point did I say voting, Connor. And like my hope, why does anybody have to be scared of Peter Todd? If Peter Todd writes a Bitcoin core client that inflates the coins, don't download it, don't install it. That's it. That's it. End of story. Nothing happens. Like,
Right.
Why do people have to be scared? And
The
to go back,
problem is that the problem is that software doesn't solve everything. Like there is a social component to absolutely everything. Like game theory doesn't exist if nobody plays the game.
I was trying to make a point with that multi-sig thing earlier, and I kind of just got cut off in the middle. But like to sum up real quick though, like if you have 5 keys in a multi-sig, you have to have 5 separate public keys in a transaction, 5 separate signatures, and that's way more expensive because you pay based on the size of the transactions. Well, the things the developers do is look to create efficiencies. And like the Schnorr signature proposal, a new signature scheme, allows us to do that multi-sig where we can take those 5 separate public keys and compress them into one. We can take those 5 separate signatures and compress them into one and still validate it. And it saves a shit ton of money for everybody using it. And like, that's what developers do. They find these efficiencies.
Shinobi, so when you tell me there's a group of developers in the communities, the first thing I think is communist, and I don't care who it is. I don't trust anybody, especially white people. So when you tell me a bunch of people are in a room making decisions for Bitcoin, I have my Bitcoin, I don't feel easy. So I need you to sell me on why it's okay, because I don't get this consensus thing that you said. What you said did not make any sense to me. I need you to sell me on why this thing is not communist. This community is not holding the fate of Bitcoin in their hands.
And afterward, I'd like to speak on behalf of all white people.
But it doesn't happen behind closed doors, Hotep. Like every single meeting developers have is public. It's logged. You can look it up. You can read it. You can listen.
So can I use like Bitcoin 3.0 instead of 4.0? Is that what's happening here? Or does everybody
No,
have
like-
to run the same version of the blockchain?
You can run different versions. Like my node that I use is actually 2 versions out of date because I actually wait before I upgrade my node. I don't do it right away in case there's bugs or problems and things. And it's still compatible. Like they specifically make sure when they update a new version, it works just fine with the rest. And then, to go back to the point I made earlier regarding like markets, like, it might not be like us trading money for goods and services, but, there's a marketplace of ideas. Like the only market isn't just us buying and selling stuff. And people picking what software they're going to run and use is a market. Like you have your say in that market, just like any other market. Like that is not communism.
No, me first, Connor.
Go for it.
So, and again, speaking on behalf of all white people, I have to say that just because the market does something, even if they do it for a long time or think it's a really great idea, the wisdom of the crowd can absolutely unequivocally be wrong. So we need to establish what are the fundamental truths that we believe in, what are the problems that we need to solve, and what are the values that we're trying to convey with all of the behavior that we do. And if we can't agree on that, we're never really going to agree on anything. But we have to be able to say that developer groups can be in complete consensus and be absolutely wrong, just like any other group of people. So that's a crucial point that I think we need to get past. Like these people are brilliant. Like I mean, Peter Wheely or Will, I don't know how he pronounces the last name. He's a brilliant software developer. Like SegWit, from a coding standpoint, is majestic. However, I disagree with how it's implemented and what it does and how it changes behavior across the network. It changes the incentives of the network to something that is fundamentally not good. So the wisdom of that crowd, in my opinion, is bad, even though it's popular.
And Kurt said it, you said that perfectly. And I want to just tack on and have you guys address the fact that in economics, there's these things called unintended consequences. And so what you need to convince us is why this developer consensus or what Kurt just very perfectly said, the wisdom of crowds will not lead to unintended consequences in the Bitcoin economy in the future. And the reality of it is that people that centrally planned systems can never guarantee that.
And now I need the BSV people to tell me why your community is not susceptible to the same dev communists in BTC.
Completely different culture. So for us, like, here's the thing: BTC primarily markets itself. The people in the BTC community market that value will necessarily spill into BTC because it exists. Whereas the BSV community says that we need to be creating fundamental value with Bitcoin and push it out into the economy. We need to be creating something that creates an external value. We want to give people value. Well, we want to sell them value, frankly. But BTC is the exact opposite. They're saying there's value here. You need to come to us and discover it. You need to participate in our valuable game. So they're sucking in, and they're completely different strategies. So we actually have a very different view on economics and participation, which, again, I don't see BTC people as enemies. We just don't agree on the same economic reality, and that's okay.
This communist stuff, I need to put this shit to rest once and for all.
Wait, Shinobi, hold on.
You left. Can I just tack on to what Kurt said?
Go ahead.
So to you, Hotep, or to anyone that doesn't know anything about BSV, it's committing itself to locking the protocol back down once the original Satoshi protocol is restored, meaning the original economics, and that'll be February 2020. We will never have to trust that a protocol developer will change the consensus rules. But to add on to Kurt's point, just one bit at a time here, there was a company called Satoshi Dice in BTC, and they created a gambling company, essentially. The Bitcoin core developers changed the protocol to the point where they could no longer operate their company. And what Kurt just said, the culture in Bitcoin SV is we all want to build companies on top of Bitcoin. So let's lock the protocol down, just like the internet does not change. The internet protocol is set in stone for the most part right now, so that I can build a company today, complete building the company in 2 years, and I don't have to worry about some centralized developer group changing the protocol to the point where I can no longer have my company.
Okay, so McCormack says you guys don't have a Bitcoin dev community. You guys are saying you do have a dev community. Yeah, I still don't believe that your community is impervious to communist takeover.
It's impervious until February of 2020 when the protocol is locked and set in stone. And the reality of it is that miners are the ones that employ developers. And the miners in Bitcoin SV are committed to locking the protocol down so that companies can be built on top of Bitcoin. Because once you have companies creating millions of transactions on top of Bitcoin, miners make a lot of money. So miners are actually incentivized to only have developers that will lock the protocol down so that you can build gigantic corporations on top of Bitcoin that produce. The beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that you can build applications that aren't possible with the traditional internet. So it's in a miner's direct incentive to have large companies come into Bitcoin. Large companies will never go near BTC, and that's what Facebook said. Facebook actually looked at BTC and said, we're never going to be able to fit what we want to do on BTC. We're going to go to this. We're going to build our own little centralized cryptocurrency. And the last point I want to make is that the entire cryptocurrency space is a scam because Bitcoin itself can do every single thing that every cryptocurrency can do. That's what no one likes to talk about, is that Bitcoin itself, when you allow it to be unleashed like Satoshi originally created, has smart contracts, tokens, and everything that everyone loves to talk about in the wider cryptocurrency world. And that's why there's a lot of vested interest in a lot of players in the cryptocurrency world to not take a liking to Bitcoin SV because it threatens their entire profit motive.
Okay.
No large
this
company's going to build on BSV.
This communist shit
It's just not
needs
gonna
to
happen.
stop. Okay. You're saying because some group who does something of their own accord creates something and then
we hear
puts
each
it
other?
out there, and people can choose to do that or not, then that's communist central planning. Well, you call that a company instead of a developer group, and a product instead of a free piece of software. And think about how crazy you sound trying to call that communist. So you're the one trying to dictate what they should do instead of going and competing yourself, making your choice in the market. You're completely twisting conceptual labels.
I think Kurt wants.
You have to establish what is a fundamental truth, because right now there are billions of people that are self-identified communists in the world, but they're going to steal or buy or procure food in a way that is not truly communist. So this is like this no true Scotsman argument ad infinitum. But the fact of the matter is that if we cannot agree on a fundamental truth, then absolutely everything is up for grabs. And that's exactly what communism is. It's this Hegelian dialectic extrapolated out to everything.
Shinobi, we're not saying that you're communist.
Centrally planning everything. No, I'm not saying you are communist, but you centrally planning things as a communist is centrally planning everything. Like my actions. Like if you want to argue core is communist, then explain to me how
communism isn't exactly making decisions. It's more or less about control.
No, but it's controlling decisions. So how is my decision to run a piece of software being controlled? They make something, they put it out there, and people use it or they don't. That's a market. That's how a market works. A group makes a product, they throw it out there, and the market values it or it doesn't. Like, how is that communist?
So the reason why, there's an important distinction here. I'm not actually disagreeing with what you're saying right there. What we're, I think, saying here is that Bitcoin itself is a monetary system, okay? So if, like I mentioned earlier, if the whole point of Bitcoin is to remove the power from money, BTC has not accomplished that. Bitcoin SV has not accomplished it until February of 2020, when no one can change the rules anymore. We have to change the rules to unscrew up everything that BTC did. No, see, Shinobi, this is where you're getting wrong, because again,
so if all the miners of BSV changed the rules, they didn't change the rules. If 100% of the miners of BSV just go, we're going to change something, it didn't change.
This is all described in the white paper.
It may change, but they may also be wrong. They may create something that is not Bitcoin.
He just said it couldn't change. And he's again continuing to try to act like releasing software that you cannot force people to use, that people only choose to use freely is communist. And then he says something like it can't change. There's a set group of people under your definition, the miners, who if they change something because they're the nodes and they're in control of the system, then they've just changed the system.
Are you a Bitcoin maximalist?
I think that label's stupid. That's something Vitalik Buterin came up with to insult Bitcoiners. Like people call themselves that because they're memeing you. That's not a serious thing.
No, I'm asking. I am a Bitcoin maximalist. I would say Kurt is probably a Bitcoin maximalist. I won't speak for you, Kurt. But
You're
why
Bitcoin
are you?
SV Maximus.
No, Bitcoin. Yeah.
No,
So
Bitcoin SV Maximus.
Bitcoin. Yeah. So Shinobi, why are you not a Bitcoin maximalist?
Because that's you're trying to label me. You're trying to define me, try to box me in with your constraints and labels, and try to force me to associate with that, and instead of just making my arguments. Like what you're doing right now is political rhetoric. It's not an actual logical argument. It's playing perception games.
Can I explain why I asked the question? So I asked the question here because if you are into Bitcoin, you should be into, in my opinion, if you read the founding document and what the person who created it wanted to create, you're for peer-to-peer digital cash for the world, and you're for money with power removed from it. That's and it's one global chain across the entire world, one blockchain, an honest ledger. The word honest is used in the white paper like 13 times or something like that. Okay. So Bitcoin
it's
itself,
usually saying that if miners aren't honest, the whole system fails. That's the context that word is mostly used in the white paper.
yes. So you believe that large companies that are financially invested in the system are going to be dishonest. So you think that corporations are evil?
No, that's again, you're trying to box me in with black and white rhetorical, like political bullshit. Let me finish. Some corporations can be evil, some are not. What you just tried to do is force me into making a black and white general statement that you can attack me for, because there's clearly corporations that are not evil out there. You're playing rhetorical games now. You're not actually making arguments.
I'm gonna hop in here.
Yeah.
Dean Little, he said if in BTC Satoshi is irrelevant, the white paper doesn't matter, and the original protocol is wrong, why do you still call it Bitcoin? Spence R. Rex, explain the inconsistencies in the documents Fictoshi in the Kleiman case on timestamps. CSW also cried in court. Hope you guys go broke. Yeah, we're going to talk about that later. Raul Duke, tomatoes. Smug cunt. Peter, I trust Mossad Greg and his sock puppets. Oh boy. Rob B, when Gigamegs. I guess he's talking about BSV. Stop and decrypt. He said, I once saw Craig's butthole. Trust me, I have a pic right here on my laptop behind me. Okay. So he said, if BTC can't figure out how to scale while BSV already has, does that mean BSV wins by default? I want you guys to answer that question. Dave Mullen Murr, Shinobi, how can your point about devs checking each other be true if all the devs who disagree with core get kicked out and smeared? Ooh.
They don't. That is an outright lie. Like I said, the developer meetings are public. There are logs posted. You can go read their constant disagreements over all kinds of
stuff. Can I tell you a historical story? A historical story that disproves him? So in 2015, Gavin Andreessen, who is the person that Satoshi handed the Bitcoin repository over to, tried to increase the block size because, again, Satoshi always wanted to increase the block size. And he created a fork of Bitcoin Core called Bitcoin XT. Okay. So, and this Gavin Andreessen,
factually inaccurate. Mike Hearn created that fork long before Gavin actually implemented the block size increase proposal to that.
I think they would have considered each other allies in that regard.
I would think so too. And what happened with Bitcoin XT, so aside from the fact that Gavin Andreessen was completely ostracized from Bitcoin for a multitude of reasons, Bitcoin XT nodes were spun up to essentially try and do what Shinobi is talking about. Shinobi, he loves to talk about how, no, Bitcoin isn't centralized to the core developers. Anyone can run Bitcoin software. This is what they tried to do. And Bitcoin XT nodes were DDoSed. Like literally, they were DDoSed from even
trying. Now you're trying to take the actions of unidentifiable people on the internet.
No. Oh, sorry. Okay. So again, this is what happened. So you can pretend it didn't happen. Bitcoin XT nodes were identified and DDoSed and were not even allowed to exist. People were scared to run an XT node. The reality of it is that Bitcoin, and the reason why, Shinobi had that Blockstream spy hat on, there's an entire group of online trolls and people that are very technically competent to attack people that want to increase the block size. This has been happening for a very long time. They like to pretend that this history wasn't part of it.
Stop right.
Sorry, Bitcoin
what you
XT
just did is you just took the actions of random people on the internet, you cannot identify and try to insinuate that they were my actions or I am part of that unidentified.
No, I'm not.
group.
No, Shinobi.
Keep going back to these little subtle rhetorical games. And as well as Gavin and the entire XT incident, Mike Hearn started that fork long before Gavin tried to increase the block size just to do non-consensus changes. And Gavin actually was the one taking consultant jobs at all kinds of companies and promising businesses we can do things without consulting with anybody else, pitching proposals for how to move forward without talking to any other developers or people in the community, just making these private deals with companies like Coinbase that he got consultant positions at. Private backdoor deals.
God forbid companies build on top of Bitcoin. And the last thing I'll mention, so the reality is, again, Hotep, I encourage you to look into this history. People were scared to run Bitcoin XT nodes. In one circumstance, an entire city or entire town's ISP was DDoSed. This is real history.
Why is that relevant?
Because it means that people are attacked and smeared if they ever try and do something against Bitcoin Core. It's a fact.
Hold on.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about attacks and smears? How about, have I been attacked and smeared?
Yes, so have I, and so has
No.
Everyone's
I'm asking you a question. Have I been attacked and smeared?
Probably.
By Craig Wright, and have I been attacked and smeared by Calvin Ayre? Have I? Just try and answer a yes or no question.
Did you smear them first? I think you smeared them first.
No, the difference is
I'll go ahead and give you a yes for the record.
Yeah,
but I don't know that it wasn't merited. But the answer is yes.
Check it out, fellas. Check it out. If we about to get into a bitch fest, I'm gonna finish these. Super chats. He says, is Peter eating his crayons live on YouTube? Crypto Paradigm. He said, BSVers adhering to the original white paper with the religious zealotry would still be using the original iPhone and a Model T Ford. And one play 5. Core boys are done. Commies don't want to expand. Brendan Lee, consensus is not decided by the VSV community. It's set by miners who vote on rules with hash power.
Yes, also a good point. Yeah.
I like that. Now I understand that. Miners pay for the devs who have no power in BSV. Okay. Raul Duke, 600K block size, baby. Crypto Paradigm, imagine thinking Bitcoin is a communist community. And one play 5. Yes, that's called communism because isn't BTC a protocol? JC Pocket, no users run nodes on BSV can change easily. Raul Duke, I don't know about you guys, but I like my blocks big. That's gay.
I'd like to comment on two things in there if I can.
Well, no, because I asked a question and you've answered it. Listen, I just wanted to make a point. If you're going to talk about being smearing, I'm just going to tell you now, I'm 5 years into drug recovery. I haven't done drugs in 5 years yet.
Congratulations.
Craig Wright the other day signs an arts poster calling me McDruggy. I've had Kevin Pham repeatedly calling me druggy. Go into YouTube now and look at all the comments. People saying Pete wants another bump. So I've been smeared as a druggie despite I've been 5 years into recovery. So if you want to talk about smearing, the leaders of your project are the ones smearing people. And now you're saying, am I smearing him? Well, what have I said? Is Craig Wright I've called Craig Wright a fraud. Well, He's once been convicted of being fraud, and the second time he's been called a fraud by a judge. Okay, so he is a fraud. So that's the truth. Secondly, I've said he's a liar. Repeatedly has been proven to be a liar. Like there is like a whole website dedicated to showing all the lies he said. I'd love you to answer those. So that is also true. And I've said he's not Satoshi because he isn't Satoshi. So the three things I've said are absolutely true. They're not smearing.
And also, I think all sides in this.
You're fucking hypocrites. That's all it is.
Smearing and attacks. This is
but you're doing hypocrites. You're the leaders of your projects are smearing people.
Pete, you got to
complain.
Pete, you got to refresh so you can hear Shinobi.
And I'd like to say, first of all, we've all been unpleasant to each other. Like Peter has me blocked on Twitter for some reason. I have no idea why, but he's called me names, and I think I'm a generally jovial person. In fact, I respect Peter as a broadcaster. I think he does a great show. I disagree with him, but I think he's a talented broadcaster. But we've had smearfest back and forth. I don't mean any ill will, and I don't know that Peter does either. It's Twitter, right?
Yeah.
And whether that's fair or not, I think yes, we've smeared each other. I realize you're in a different situation, being in court with Craig Wright over the whole thing.
He's actually said, Calvin has actually said his goal is to bankrupt me. His goal is to bankrupt me as a human being. Okay.
And again, I'm
Yeah.
not here to advocate for Calvin or Craig either. That's not.
Connor is. He's
No, but like
advocating for
Kurt,
frauds,
Connor, like
criminals,
Peter,
liars.
like everybody.
All right, so y'all talking about a whole
Like
bunch
guys,
of
this
y'all talking about bitch shit right now? Like that's what we call it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Like
Right.
he said, I don't want to hear about that shit. That shit corny to me.
I think
Let's
Peter
talk
should be.
about let's talk about what Brendan Lee said. He said consensus is not decided by the BSV community. It is set by miners who vote on rules with hash power. Anybody want to talk about that?
It's true.
I actually have a response to that. And like, bear with me here, but like, a miner mines the blocks that order the transactions, okay, and then a node accepts that block and validates it, and then acts on it or not. So
When did
in
that
this
definition
situation,
become the
miners,
definition?
You're making up a
no,
definition.
this is no. I'm walking through a logical argument. Now, the miners produce something that contains movements of coins, the thing of value, and the node that the person receiving money validates that. That's the consumer. The miners in this situation produce something, and the consumer chooses to value it. Now, that's how this works, period. I don't care what the system is.
How does the consumer play into this? How do they
If a miner mines a block that my node says is invalid, I will not pay him money for coins that he mined in those blocks. Like a business will not pay him money for those coins.
Right.
Like the consumer decides what's valued. And I mean, now you can get into a situation where the consumers choose to just do whatever the miner says and buy stuff. But ultimately, at any time, they can exert that power again. The consumer is the dictator of what happens in a market, not the producer.
I think this is the problem again with redefining the definition of a node, is that the consumer of Bitcoin is not the node operator that does not have hash power. Like,
Kurt, this isn't about definitions to me. Where I'm walking through a logical argument.
If
I don't
there
care.
aren't definitions, then there's no debate. You
words.
can't debate if you don't agree on the same reality.
No, like Kurt, like follow what I'm saying here. The miner is burning money mining those blocks to get those coins. If nobody is willing to pay him for those coins, he shuts down eventually. Like he doesn't decide anything. He does what the market allows him to do.
But why does someone who's not burning value get to make that decision? So somebody that's spending potentially billions of dollars to create that thing.
Why do I get to decide what I spend my paycheck on? Because I'm the one spending my paycheck. You didn't earn it.
In your example, you earned nothing. You're arbitrarily making a decision as some kind of middleman.
No,
You're saying that
value. I took my fiat value, the value of my labor, and used that to acquire Bitcoin. Because
your node didn't do that. You did that as a separate entity. That's you being a user. That's not you being a node.
Kurt, I look at my node to determine whether I have been paid. If my node does not get a block with my payment in it and say it's valid, I didn't get paid. I'm not giving you anything until that node says I got paid. That's how a business works.
You're conflating two different things.
Here's an example. Go mine an invalid block on any blockchain on Earth and go try to take the mining reward from that block and deposit it on an exchange and sell it and tell me what happens.
So, okay, there's actually two things here. Number one, and this is always the argument that I find comes back to. So you envision a world where miners always have to sell out to fiat. There's a completely different vision in what we're trying to accomplish here in that instance. And the other thing I want to bring up, Shinobi, if users validate nodes, if users validate blocks, you are completely contradicting the initial design of Bitcoin. And the reason why it's actually important, I'll explain this in a technical manner. And Peter, I'll give you a little hit piece here. So Craig Wright was one of the first people to tell us that Bitcoin itself is a small world network. Okay, so that term was coined by Stanley Milgram when he found that people in the United States are generally 6 degrees of freedom separated from each other. And what we actually find in Bitcoin is that because only miners are nodes, and because miners are economically incentivized to be densely connected to each other, that we actually end up with the most densely connected network in the history of mankind. And when the network that you are describing, Shinobi, where users have any say in the consensus of the blockchain means we don't end up with a small network. And it means that we actually don't create anything new. We end up creating a network that can be Sybil attacked, which we can talk about what a Sybil attack is if Hotep doesn't know.
I don't know.
So a Sybil attack is basically where you can spin up a fake node in a network and man in the middle attack someone. And there's Microsoft researchers that wrote a paper called On Bitcoin and Red Balloons. And I encourage every single person listening to this to read it. And they come away with the conclusion that any network that has 3 or more hops is vulnerable to a Sybil attack. Does it mean that a Sybil attack occurs all the time? No, that's not what I'm saying. But any mesh network, for the most part, can be Sybil attacked. Lightning Network, the entire scaling solution.
What you're referring to
can I finish?
is an eclipse attack.
Can I finish? So in Lightning Network, which is the entire scaling solution that BTC people are hanging their hats on, is a mesh network. It can be easily Sybil attacked. Bitcoin itself has a network distance of 1.3, a measured network distance of 1.3, which is unprecedented in modern networking. And what Shinobi and the BTC world wants to do is they want to instead put forth this network that isn't the small world Bitcoin network of miners. They want to put users into that realm, and they want to actually introduce Sybil attacks into a otherwise brilliantly secure network.
Okay, so a couple of things. First off, the Sybil attack, no. Proof of work solves Sybil attacks. I can surround you with a million fake nodes, and if I don't have proof of work attached to what I'm sending to you, you ignore me. And
Correct.
now regarding the whole whether miners have to sell their Bitcoin for money or not, it doesn't matter. That dynamic works the same. In the one where they have to sell money for fiat, they have to sell it to the exchange. And if that exchange's node says it's invalid, they can't sell it or get money.
Well, let's get back to what you just said. Proof of work.
No, hold on. Let me finish now. Okay.
Sorry.
Now, in the other one, the miner gives the Bitcoin directly to the electric company. And if the electric company's node says that block is invalid, they cut the miner's power off. It doesn't matter whether you're selling Bitcoin for fiat or whether everything runs on Bitcoin. That dynamic is exactly the same.
Okay. I admit defeat there. Let's get back to the other point. The Sybil attack. You just actually identified that proof of work is what solves the Sybil attack point of Bitcoin. And when you tell me that users validate blocks and are part of the consensus mechanism in Bitcoin, you're telling me that, yes, that vision of Bitcoin is vulnerable to Sybil attacks because you don't have proof of work as a user running a node.
No. See, like you're conflating Sybil attack. What you're talking about is an eclipse attack where you surround a node and feed them fake information, which is why they validate the contents of those blocks. But again, what we're talking about here in the dynamic is the fact that the person receiving money has all the power. You can't Sybil attack that. Like, what does it matter if I'm getting paid and I have one node or I have a million nodes? It doesn't matter. That literally has zero effect on whether or not I consider that payment valid or not. It does nothing.
So listen. And Hotep, actually, I'll put this into context for you, who maybe is a little lost here. Okay.
Okay.
So
no, I'm following.
Okay. So the cost to spin up a node in Bitcoin, because again, as defined in Section 5 of the white paper, a node mines, is very expensive. It's very expensive to introduce a new node into the Bitcoin network. The reason why that's a feature and not a bug is because of what Shinobi just described. In the modern internet, you can spin up a million fake nodes or in the internet, and then you can just money. Exactly. And there's no economic cost to creating a node in the internet. Right. So the reason why Bitcoin is really valuable, and the reason why this vision of users, any user today could spin up 1,000 fake Bitcoin mining nodes that aren't actually doing anything. They're just Bitcoin nodes, which is what the vision of.
Well, hold on. You just said mining nodes. You just
sorry. You're right. Sorry. Let me clarify. I apologize. So you could run the Bitcoin software across 1,000 nodes. And then in the vision of BTC is that those nodes are just as valid as mining nodes. This is what people talk about. Users validate blocks. And so it means that the vision of BTC is vulnerable to Sybil attacks because they are saying that the person that spins up 1,000 Amazon Web Service instances of Bitcoin are the same as miners.
I just said the opposite.
So do users validate blocks? If a miner sees a block as valid and a user sees it as invalid, who is more correct?
Dude, Connor, a node doesn't matter unless a human being is using it to validate their payment. Okay.
Do users
like
validate
I can have
blocks?
a million nodes out there. It doesn't matter how many nodes are out there unless there's a human being behind it deciding whether a payment they received is valid or not, which is what I just said. If I'm receiving a payment, me having one node or 1,000 nodes, it does nothing. There's no difference. It's
and then
just
you know what you do?
Looking at it.
You broadcast the payment to the mining networks so that it actually gets put in the blockchain. That's the entire point. If you broadcast that to 1,000 non-mining nodes, you don't accomplish anything because you don't put your transaction to a blockchain. This is the entire problem. To answer my question, do users validate the blockchain? Yes or no? Do users validate the blockchain?
What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like, I don't think you understand how degrees of separation work in a network.
You just said users
it
run
propagates
nodes.
very quickly. Connor, it takes literally a second or two for a transaction to get to the entire Bitcoin network. Like, what are you talking about? Civil nodes and transactions don't get to miners. Like, you're not making any sense. More nodes being on the network does not stop a transaction getting to a miner. Like, what are you talking about?
Okay, so let me back up and explain it for you. Okay, so you said that users run nodes to validate their payments. Okay,
but to validate what they're receiving.
So here's what I'm saying. If let's say I run a coffee shop and I run a node as you're describing, okay, and I receive a payment, that payment is not valid until it's sent to the miners to be included in the blockchain. Is that correct or not? And then I'll keep going. Yes or no? No,
it's not valid until the miners do that and your node gets that block and validates it.
So users validate the blockchain.
This is
users validate the blockchain.
Intersubjective system. Do you know what an intersubjective system is?
Do users you just said that users validate the blockchain. Can you answer that question?
Yeah, why wouldn't you answer? I said that. Yes, I've said that.
Okay, so then you're describing a network that has a consensus mechanism that can be Sybil attacked. That's what I've been getting at, because like you said earlier, proof of work is the solution to a Sybil attack.
If you're doing a Sybil attack and you're in a coffee shop, those are two different things, right? So one of those is invalid and one of them is actually valid.
Shinobi just said that proof of work solves the Sybil attack problem, but then he tells me that users that have no proof of work validate the blockchain. He's contradicting himself.
No, miners don't validate.
They can't both be true. No, the way to validate a block is to build on top of it. If you're not building on top of a block, you have not validated the block because you have not contributed proof of work.
Kurt hasn't said much. Go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, the way to validate a block is to build on top of it. And if you have no way to contribute proof of work, you have no way to build on top of a block. And therefore, you do not have a way to validate a block in the blockchain. So you are something other than a validating node if you do not contribute proof of work that builds on top of that block, period. That is the nature of
mining.
As described in Section 5 of the white paper, Shinobi.
All right, Section 5. All right, can we stop this, guys? Because we're having this same connection.
Yeah, I'd also like to ask Hotep if you think this is the most valuable conversation to be having right now, because I think there's other things that we could be talking about that would give more value to the people that might be interested in learning about Bitcoin. Because right now we're arguing about like fine details that make sense to about 100 people on the planet. And I don't know that that's the most valuable thing to be doing here.
Well, fuck the viewers, first of all. This is about me, and I'm learning this. I'm learning what you guys are talking about, and it's helping me understand this thing. And we are at a point of redundancy in this argument that I've started to realize. But Shinobi is making a lot of sense. Connor's making a lot of sense too. What did you want to say about the Model T, Kurt?
You know, some of your comments before, like these comments about communism and the Model T and things. And I just want to say that if we're going to talk about like a locked protocol, what the comment was that BSV users want all cars to be the Model T. And I would say in a fundamental way, the Model T and a Tesla are the same thing because they're both automobiles. They both function with four wheels on the road and an axle and a steering wheel. And there's something that creates energy that drives that vehicle. There's an accelerator and brakes and all these things. And the difference is the amount of engineering that goes into each one. So to have a locked protocol of an automobile is to say that both a Model T and a Tesla are cars. They're automobiles. And we agree that if we add wings or that if we add fins or a flotation device, that we've either created an airplane or a boat. And those are therefore totally different protocols that have a completely different function in the real world. So to say that BSV is a Model T is actually not a criticism, because yes, we believe that the automobile fundamentally functions the same way it did 100 plus years ago as it does today. They're faster, they're better engineered, they're more efficient in many, many, many ways. But they are fundamentally the same protocol because the protocol of an automobile works. It was designed fundamentally correct. Now, the only difference is the amount of extra little ideas that have been contributed to it. But the fundamental idea, which is what I keep trying to get back to with Bitcoin, is saying what was fundamentally correct about Bitcoin. And then can we stick with those things and stop screwing with definitions and stop trying to completely change the way the network functions? Because cars have worked just fine for 100 plus years now. And Bitcoin can work just fine 100 plus years from now, given the basics of the Bitcoin network. And we can add different things without changing that consensus, without changing what makes Bitcoin Bitcoin. But if you change something that makes Bitcoin Bitcoin, if you change the economics of the network, or if you change, what makes it float, or how blocks are produced, or how they are validated, then you are no longer talking about Bitcoin. Just like adding wings to the Model T makes it a really shitty airplane, it does not make it a cool car. Does this make sense?
Yeah. So I'm going to get back to the super chats. River, $5. She says, so if BTC doesn't represent the Bitcoin white paper, why do you still call it Bitcoin? Jimmy Odom, can Bitcoin be seized? Dave Mullenmer, how is BTC going to survive the next few halvings? Permanent inflation? Influential core developers seem to think so. I want that answered. I want that question answered. Brendan Lee, fake news is another type of Sybil attack. There is no proof of work and node consensus. Last one, Joshua Petty. Twitch.com is a business built on BSV. It utilizes microtransactions and users can own their data. It can't be built on BTC. Small block fees too high. Well, Twitch is trash, but anyway. Let's go ahead and I want somebody to go ahead and answer that question where they said, how is BTC going to survive the next few halvings?
I'd like to comment on that. The issue with BTC and halvings is that it can survive if it can onboard exponential users and therefore create an exponential rise in the fiat price. But the question is, then can BTC onboard exponential users? And that's something that we can't answer. Can demand go up exponentially, and can the network handle, let's say, 1 billion people or 2 billion people who want to participate in the BTC economy? And if the answer is yes, well, then BTC could survive those halvings. But if the answer is no, well, then it can't. So then we have to figure out in what regard can an extra 2, 3, 4 billion people use the BTC network. And I would argue that they cannot, and that's the fundamental reason why we believe that big block scaling is crucial, that we need to be heading that direction, while BTC says absolutely not, but the price will rise exponentially, even though it cannot deal with an exponential amount of demand.
I mean, wouldn't we be able to agree that there are concerns over scaling on every blockchain?
No.
You don't think that? So you think 2 billion people can transact daily on the BSV blockchain, and you'll be able to propagate blocks just fine?
It never hits a scale ceiling. Yes.
Can you guys hear me?
Okay.
Clear this time?
That was written in 2009, Peter. It never hits a scale ceiling. I'm sorry that you don't believe that, but it's going to happen.
Well, no, I don't.
Like it or not.
No, I don't believe it, because
BSV
I don't believe
is going to show you that it can happen. That's the whole point.
So when you start having terabyte blocks, you're going to have a very centralized system. We're seeing that with Ethereum at the moment. I'm not even technical when I know this shit.
Let's talk about
Ethereum's become centralized.
Perfect. So centralization of a blockchain. So actually, I'm really glad you brought this up, Peter. So what Peter is actually bringing up is an economic argument that monopolies are a real thing without regulatory intervention. So this is, again, the fundamental problem. And this is why I actually do believe most BTC proponents are, they lean socialist or communist, whether they believe it or not. And that's because if you believe that mining will become centralized, you actually believe that monopolies exist in nature. And that's just not true. Again, Bitcoin is a competitive system. So you have market leaders, yes, but you will always have a distributed system of competitive mining. That's the entire point of Bitcoin. And if you don't believe in that, then you should not be working with Bitcoin, because that's the entire point of Bitcoin. It's large companies that will be competing with each other. So just like, Google, Amazon, Facebook, these are large corporations, but they actually do compete with each other. The problem that we have in the United States is that these companies have essentially what amounts to regulatory capture. In Bitcoin, there is no regulatory capture unless a centralized developer group gives favor to some miners over another. And we actually saw this in the Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV fork. So in the Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV fork, there were certain miners like Calvin Ayre, for example, who were committed to radically scaling Bitcoin and have invested large amounts of money in the infrastructure of mining. And then there are other miners that couldn't keep up with scaling the block size. And so what the Bitcoin Cash developers did is they said, no, we're not going to increase the block size, and we're going to actually introduce a new consensus change to make scaling easier. So again, any concern about centralization of mining is an economic argument that monopolies exist without regulatory capture, which is an economic fallacy.
I wasn't talking about centralization of mining.
Can we go back to the Sybil attack?
Yeah, nodes are
stuff
miners.
Now that my connection is
Not
here,
all nodes are
because I had no chance to respond to that.
Go for it.
Go ahead, Shinobi.
So, like, what on earth do you mean that Bitcoin is Sybil attacked because of nodes? Because the way you put that earlier made no coherent sense. You never actually articulated what form of Sybil attack just by running nodes can do anything, can hurt somebody or steal their money or change anything.
Yeah, I'll explain that. So it may have gotten lost in what I was getting at. You said that users will run a node to validate payments. And my point being that if you don't distinguish between, in the case of consensus, if you aren't distinguishing between a mining node and someone running the Bitcoin software that is not mining, if I take a payment and then I send it out to a random set of nodes without distinguishing between miners and non-miners, but we tell everyone that non-mining nodes determine consensus, then you can Sybil attack a payment. And what I mean by that is I could theoretically, let's say, set up a spool of nodes around a coffee shop. And then when you send your payment off to the network thinking it's going to get included in a blockchain, I can lie to you and tell you, yes, this is in a blockchain.
That's not a Sybil attack. That's called a double spend attack. And what you just did is the most intellectually dishonest conflation, trying to pretend a double spend attack is a Sybil attack. Those things have nothing to do with each other.
So
I'm going to boil down this analogy even simpler. I'm going to boil this down even simpler.
Okay.
Hotep, I get a $20 bill from you and I put it in a counterfeit checking machine. Okay. Now I take that $20 bill and I use 100 counterfeit checking machines instead of just the one. What difference does that make in anything? That doesn't affect anybody else. It doesn't affect anything. It doesn't affect your choices, what you're doing economically.
Until I go spend it.
That makes no sense. Yeah.
Until I try to spend it.
All right.
If Shinobi, if you spin up fake nodes, that's a Sybil attack. That's the definition of a Sybil. He's just making things up. A Sybil attack is spinning up fake nodes in a network. That's all it is.
But if the node has to, each transaction has to be verified, like what does it matter?
So listen, this is the entire point of BSV. Miners are nodes, as again defined when Bitcoin was released. Miners are the ones that validate payments, so the ones that validate the blockchain. They're the one that validate everything. That is the entire point of Bitcoin. What Shinobi is saying is a made-up version of Bitcoin.
No, okay. We'll go back to my point now that I'm back. Again, what I tried saying earlier. Do you understand what an intersubjective system is?
Do you want to explain it to me?
There is a subjective system. There is like me, like my single subjective viewpoint. There is an objective viewpoint. What is, regardless of anything. And then there is intersubjective. What subjective things we hold in common. Bitcoin, any of these systems are intersubjective systems. The only reason that they're coherent systems is because multiple people have the same subjective viewpoint on it. And that's the point with a node validating money you receive. Everybody does that independently. And the only reason there's one network that comes out of that coherently is because everybody considers the same thing valid. Everybody's using the same rules. And so when they get fed stuff from miners, everybody winds up at the same place. Like that's how all of this stuff works.
No,
like it is decided by the consumers.
You're
Which
just
is the
making up a
people
version of
being
Bitcoin
paid.
that does not exist.
Right.
You're just
Dude, how
defining
many
Bitcoin
times
the way
are
you
you
want.
going to say you're just making
The
that up?
problem is
Like,
that you're
that's been
combining
your
the
argument
definitions of
half
two
this show.
things. That if we're talking about fundamental definitions again, like we've just said, like this subjective, objective, and intersubjective, well, we need to decide again what are the objective truths of Bitcoin. So we need to have a definition that we
No,
agree on
there
for
is
who
no
is a user,
objective.
who is a node, and who is a miner. And if we
JC
disagree, then it's bunk.
JC Pocket says Sybil attack doesn't work without proof of work.
That's absolutely
Exactly.
correct. Yes.
But no,
Right.
hold on, because you need to have work attached to a block that my node gets. Otherwise, I just ignore it before I even check anything else. I check the work first, and then I check to make sure the rest of the block is valid.
Yeah. So
Like,
Shinobi,
this is an intersubjective system. And like Connor, like seriously, like I came to this show expecting an actual debate of concepts. And all I've heard so far is you guys just repeat things like you just made that up, or just keep trying to argue we define this word this way, so we win. And you're not actually responding to the concepts I'm arguing. You just keep trying to go, that word you used means something different.
So Shinobi, let's
head,
do this.
so
Let's do this. How about you craft a very specific question for them to answer in regards to this matter? Something very specific where they can't play political doublespeak with.
Okay, let me think about this for a second.
Like, what could you?
If okay, let's say this. You have a node that everybody in the world connects to with their wallets. Okay, that every single Light Wallet user connects to this node, and all the miners in the world connect to a different node. And there's just these two nodes. Who decides the rules there? And explain why you think that.
I can go, or you, Kurt, up to you.
I would say that the rules are fundamental and that the rules exist regardless of whether any node agrees that the rules are valid or not. There's a difference between valid rules and valid transactions. If we're arguing that valid rules exist, then both nodes can be wrong, both nodes can be right, and if they agree about the truth, then those nodes are correct about the rules. That's it.
And then I'll add on top of that,
if-
Shinobi, let me add on top of that real quick. So you talk about definitions. This is the only definition of everything that I care about, which is the founding document of Bitcoin. And it says at the very end, they vote with their CPU power, expressing their acceptance of valid blocks by working on extending them and rejecting invalid blocks by refusing to work on them. Any needed rules and incentives can be enforced with this consensus mechanism, describing miners.
That's not Bitcoin. That's describing the proof of work system that he designed and saying that you can use it for a lot more stuff than Bitcoin.
So this gets
That's
back to my point at the beginning. They don't care about Bitcoin. They don't care about the document that founded Bitcoin. You want to build an entire system that has nothing to do with Bitcoin. And that's fine. Go for it. That's
the definitions
fantastic.
are arbitrary. And if the definitions are arbitrary, this is the Hegelian dialectic. You have a thesis, you have an antithesis, and then which is where we're at right now. But the synthesis of both things are wrong. And that's where BTC is right now, is that they don't agree that there is a fundamental truth that matters. There is a series of debates and that the crowd makes the decision. And this is why we get back to communism, is that fundamentally communism believes that every single person is part of the consensus of whatever rights are and whatever, non-proprietarian existence and use of all this commons.
That's
and
what
all
they
that
say
stuff.
it is. That's what communists
That's what they say it is. And that's the problem, is that that's never actually how it works, is that it always turns into a cabal of the intelligentsia at the very top that make the decisions for everybody. And they brutally punish everyone who disagrees with their definitions. And that's why it's crucial to have the truth be what's actually discussed rather than everybody's opinions about the truth. Because if we can't agree on the truth, we can't agree on anything, and then we will always be at odds, and that's just a problem. So
if we don't communism and you've got a dictator,
you keep going back to
who's the dictator?
You keep
the truth is the dictator. The truth is always the dictator. It is the valid dictator.
Kurt, you keep just saying central control. You just keep saying dictate, but you have not a single time in this whole show articulated how. I have multiple times explained how devs just write software and then people run it
It's
or
a
they
zeitgeist.
don't. There's no way
It is-
to force them. So people make a choice you disagree with. And so because you disagree with, I'm being forced by the boogeyman you point out at the top, instead of I made a choice that you disagree with. Like, you have not been able to actually articulate these means of control beyond just going,
because
they're there.
culture is the means of control. The Soviet Union was self-policing. You only had to kill 3 or 4 people in every village, and then everybody turned in all of their damn potatoes for generations. That's
Shinobi,
it.
we have definitions in Bitcoin SV. We have truth. We have things that we point to say we all agree on this. What you want to do is just make up definitions however you want to fit.
Dude, and
the
we
entire
have
point.
something we agree on that you just keep saying is made up. How is what you said just made up? You're just interpreting somebody else's intent, their statements. You made that up.
I'm not
man.
interpreting anything.
Why is you saying I made something up as a response or an argument more valid than me saying you made it? You just made all this up.
So we're all right.
I'll
So
take it down a notch.
we're not gonna get anywhere on this one. I'm gonna get back to the super chats. Every argument that BTC makes is political, not technical. 22nd century crypto. That was Jacob Satoshi. Satoshi specifically said transaction fees were the end revenue stream for miners, not rewards. Also, isn't a waste of amazing tech to castrate it is such a way that limits its functionality to near useless. Dave Mullen-Murr, he said BTC used to market as instant free to send and limited in amount. They don't talk about the first two now. Will they drop limited in amount too?
BTC isn't a person. That was people like Roger Ver who marketed things like that. BTC can't really market itself like that. It's a network and a piece of software.
Happy Viking said BTC wicked down to 5,800. That's not true. Joshua Petty, he said, have you tried Twitch? Get paid for your content. No, I will not try Twitch. Twitch is for asses. On Yomi, Bitcoin's not a product consumers demand for its own sake. It's an economic platform for builders to make things they want. Centrally planning the platform economy is what we're calling communist. Correct. Coin Alchemist, when will Shinobi admit that he's a communist? Oh, wow.
Hotep, can I ask you a question?
See, real quick, Hotep, I just want to say, like, how many times have I tried to define Kurt or Connor? How many times have I tried to label them?
Shinobi, you can't allow yourself to get sidetracked by these ridiculous comments in the chat.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
I don't believe Shinobi is communist. I don't believe Shinobi is communist.
I don't either. I'm trying to define terms. I don't think Peter or Shinobi are communists. I think we need to define the nature of the term so that we are having a conversation that goes a direction rather than just debating, because we don't agree on the same definition of words. So it is an unproductive debate in that regard.
Hotep, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
If I'm selling you on the idea of money, of decentralized money free from government control, which one of these two sounds more interesting to you?
Okay. I'm not going to answer that.
I think what I'm yeah, go for it, Peter.
Okay. So I think I'm just going to put something out there, like, because if you sit and go through all the YouTube chats and all your BSV crowd and over again with the same bullshit arguments, I'm just going to make a point again, is that my show has done really well because I avoid all this technical bullshit, because most people don't care. And we've now had about 2 hours of arguing technical stuff where I don't think anybody coming in is actually going to have learned anything. They're not going to be able to. I don't know if you can, Hotep, decipher what.
I learned a lot. I feel like,
but I don't know.
Now.
I think a lot of people will come and go, I'm not really sure. Like, I don't understand civil attacks. I don't understand. Well, this is a civil attack. This isn't a civil attack. This can happen. This kind. Like, I don't think we're actually discussing things that real people can understand. That's going to make a difference.
What do you want to talk about?
Well, I would want to talk about just more kind of realistic things, the things that people can actually hang their hat on. Okay, the things that they can go. Me as a normal person, day to day, I've heard about this Bitcoin thing. All right, I'm thinking of buying it. Oh fuck, there's this Bitcoin Cash and this Bitcoin SV. How do I make a decision? They're not going to give a fuck about Sybil attacks and like scaling debates. They don't care. They've got no interest. I see the DMs. I see the emails coming in. All these people insulting me, but still, my show's the most listened to one because people don't give a fuck about this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, they
That's a great
don't
point,
care.
Peter.
Only Hotep Jesus cares about.
I agree.
Yeah,
I'm going
so
to
let's talk
agree
about-
wholly
let's talk-
with Peter McCormack right now.
But
Let's-
again, Peter, fuck the hoi polloi. The hoi polloi is the reason why the fucking communists run this shit now. So we can't make decisions based upon what the fucking plebs want. Fuck the proletariat. They're idiots. Hotep Jesus wanted this debate so I can understand the technicality, so I can break it down for the plebs, and I can say, look, fuck with this or don't fuck with that. And the plebs, they trust me. Like you said, they're going to come to you. They're going to trust what you say because we understand it. If the people who drive thought don't understand the technology, we're going to mislead the proletariat.
Mhm. So let's keep it simple then.
About text isn't for the proletariat. It's for me. So when I'm talking about Bitcoin or I'm selling it to somebody, I don't sound like an idiot. And I don't have to explain Sybil attacks to somebody, but I understand them now.
Sure.
Can I
Right,
answer
so
Peter's question?
Hotep, I'm 100% with you, man. But like, you know, Peter is kind of right in the sense that like
He's
you need
absolutely
to
right.
ease
I'm not saying he's not right. What I'm saying is I don't give a fuck. That's a difference.
Yeah, but I can make it easier. So we go from there. So, like, let's get into the very simple side of the technical stuff. I would always say to somebody, what is Bitcoin's unique use case? Is it for big companies like Apple to build? No, they're already building things. You know, Facebook, Apple, and everyone, nobody gives a fuck about a blockchain. They have databases that work very well for what they're doing. Blockchains are about money. That's what all they're about. So what is the unique use case here? It is a couple of things. It is somebody like myself who wanted to buy cannabis oil for my mother when she was dying, and I could do that. I could circumvent the laws because that meant something to me. And it's for somebody who's maybe in Argentina and seeing their money being debased that they have a chance to save some money. So the most important thing with Bitcoin is censorship resistance. Okay. That's the most important thing. That is the killer use case. That's all that matters. So what is the thing that's going to drive and support censorship resistance? It is to be decentralized as possible. Anybody with a fucking brain, even myself as the most stupid, untechnical person alive, knows that the more data you put on the blockchain, the less decentralized it's going to be. The less decentralized it's going to be, the more likely you've got a chance for it to be closed down or attacked by a government. So we have to keep block sizes small so we can keep it decentralized. That's all that's the only argument. Everything else.
That's a valid argument. I want to hear the rebuttal to
But
that.
there is a limiting factor there too. And here's the thing: if the goal is decentralization, you're going to have unintended consequences by moving toward that as the peak goal. And I agree that we need absolutely sufficient decentralization. We don't know what that is. We can't, again, clearly define the term. But if we have sufficient decentralization, we need to then focus on usability. Now, I understand Argentina and your mom needed marijuana, and I get that, and I don't disagree with any of that necessarily. But the problem is if your mother lived in Africa and she didn't have the ability or she didn't have the money to use the blockchain because let's say it was the $1.40 fees of earlier this year. I believe in May we were up around $2 fees. And if that censored her from being able to use Bitcoin, then Bitcoin is not an option for her to circumvent censorship because the network itself censored her from being able to make that purchase. And that is a problem that we believe in. So I want to say that I think it's crystal clear that on both sides of this is that we want people's lives to be made better because of how they use Bitcoin in their lives. We want people to be able to make the economic decisions that make their lives more valuable. So rather than assuming bad blood, which I think most small blockers and big blockers do to each other, I think we should say that, look, we're both trying to solve a problem, that we both want people to be able to use the blockchain for something that creates value or creates business or creates more opportunity for them. And we disagree on the direction that needs to come from. But you're worried about the decentralization issue causing censorship, and we're worried about fees and usability creating censorship. And again,
here's the thing, though, Kurt.
Sure.
We have solutions to the fees going up causing censorship. Like, I mean,
think
all I'm going to
it's
say is
debatable
that
at best.
there are 5 different second layer designs for Bitcoin right now. And I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I'm literally giving a talk at a conference tomorrow addressing all the scalability concerns that your camp has with it. And they're not valid concerns. Like, they are answered. It is just a matter of time of getting the upgrades into the network to enable them. We can give that mother in Africa the ability to cheaply transact without having to pay those high on-fee chains while still getting that decentralized censorship-resistant chain. Like, you guys haven't given anybody that I know with a brain a single argument for how you can solve the censorship-resistant problem beyond just trust and hope that it doesn't go bad.
There are theoretical solutions to scaling on the BTC side. They don't work consistently. I don't know that anybody would be willing to keep $500 in a Lightning node, because I don't think that a $500 transaction will settle reliably on a Lightning node or any of the other solutions. And I've studied many of them. I'm not going to go into all the second layer stuff. I don't think that they're necessarily bad ideas, but I don't think that they solve the solution fundamentally in such a way that we look at BSV and even Bitcoin Cash and say that, look, that scaling solution works. It works in the real world. And instead we're arguing about something that may work theoretically in the future compared to something that works in hand right now.
So I'm going to echo something that was in the Shinobi. Hang on. I'm going to echo something that was actually just put in one of the paid chat things, because Brendan Lee is absolutely correct here. So when you talk about centralization and decentralization, as all things in Bitcoin, these are economic questions. So the question is, what is enough decentralization? What is enough centralization? I believe the market can determine that to the best. And you actually encourage decentralization by scaling Bitcoin massively. This is put in the chat, a 10 terabyte block, a 10 terabyte block would contain $10 million in economic profit for a miner. So what you are actually scared of are large companies competing. Imagine if 100 large companies were distributed across the globe competing against each other. Would that be stop laughing. It's ridiculous. 100, listen to me. Would 100 large companies distributed across the globe geographically be enough competition to say that Bitcoin is decentralized enough for you? When is the right?
Okay, hold on. Right?
No, hold on. Let me ask you one question, then you can answer. One question.
You guys just did a tag team.
What is the
where I couldn't respond to Kurt before you came in with something else? So what Kurt just said about the Lightning Network is dude, show me the deployed application on BSV running at scale with millions of people. Because your argument right now is that the deployed layered solutions for Bitcoin aren't working. They're just experimental. Well, show me the non-experimental thing on BSV. Show me the thing running at scale.
Weather
right
SV.
Now.
Weather SV is a perfect example.
Weather SV is an agro business that is doing research.
No, if you laugh, it might make it less true somehow. Yeah.
Well, no, I agree. Isn't it 86% of the volume of BSV?
No, that
weather.
Actually, since that number was true, the volume of transactions have gone up, and the origination of those transactions has distributed.
How many users are they doing?
So Weather SV is an on-chain Bitcoin application that records weather data to the blockchain, and it's user-funded. So users can go in and say, for my city, let's say, Chicago.
All right, so how many users are we talking?
Why though?
Well, however many users have created channels, but it's filling megabyte blocks. So the same amount of traffic that's on BTC is pretty much covered by this one application on Bitcoin SV.
Why put weather data on a blockchain?
Why do you care?
Because we're having
in my opinion, I here's what I would like to see, that generationally, I would like my children to look back at history and say, you know what, if it's not on chain, if it was not etched to the chain with proof of work, I don't know that it's true. I don't know that it occurred. I want it to be debatable whether or not Teddy Roosevelt ever existed because it was pre-blockchain.
So I'm split on this, right? So what you just said makes sense, right? Like if I put it on the blockchain, then it happened. But I could also put some bullshit on the blockchain, and just like I put some bullshit in the history book, right? But
Sure.
Rich's point is something I've been thinking about. Like, I don't give a fuck about applications being on the blockchain. I thought we was talking about money. I thought we was talking about economics. Like, why are we putting applications on the blockchain?
But listen,
Well,
there's a
to
big
answer your first
It
question.
seems like the reason why people are putting applications on the blockchain is it's like a pissing contest. Like, oh, look what we can do.
To answer your first question, you said why should, like, history books, for example, you can put shit in a history book, right? But typically it's not the shit in the history book that starts. It's a generation later when people go back and say, well, Martin Luther King was XYZ. He wasn't who he was in real life. But imagine if you could etch everything he did in real time as it was occurring, and then you have this verifiable, infinite, distributed truth machine that allows you to go back and say, no, this is what he said, and this is how he did it, and this is how he transacted it, and these were his business ideas, and here's who he did business with.
What
here's
happens
who paid him,
if I
here's who he paid.
timestamp two
McCormack,
different
refresh. Shinobi's
What
talking.
happens? What happens if I timestamp two different things? I timestamp what Martin Luther King actually said, and then I make up some bullshit he didn't say.
That's what I said.
How do you tell which one is true?
One can be orphaned. This is the nature of a competitive mining network.
Same block.
If something is not true,
I take in the exact same block.
But at least it's both there. At least it's both there.
Block.
Right.
The data is there.
But what? That's not a truth machine. That doesn't ascertain the truth.
I want to hear from McCormack.
Putting information on a blockchain does not make it true.
That's not what we're saying. Truth is an
what they're saying is that at least the alternative history has been bookmarked.
Okay, here's Hotep.
It can't be
I'm gonna
deleted.
blow your mind. I'm going to blow your mind.
I'm sure you will.
You can't delete a lie.
Blow it.
There is a project on Bitcoin called Open Timestamps. You can timestamp whatever the hell you want into the Bitcoin blockchain. It doesn't cost you a dime, and you can do it infinitely because you don't have to actually put stuff in the block to timestamp it. A block is just a Merkle tree. Like it's a data structure. It's pretty much like, imagine a pyramid and it splits down to two things, and those two things split down to two things. And it's cryptographically set up so that when you go to the very bottom of the pyramid and you like reverse everything, you can prove that hash at the top is containing everything. So all you need to do is put a single top of a tree in a Bitcoin block, and you can make a tree that is infinitely big. Like, you can literally timestamp every piece of information recorded on this planet every 10 minutes in the Bitcoin BTC blockchain with a single transaction. So this whole idea that you have to do
let me jump in here. And one play 5. He said, don't applications make money? What are you saying? Well, and one play 5 is somebody who's worked with over 20 startups. No, applications don't make money. They lose money. It's really a long time before an application even gets out of water. We're talking about Amazon wasn't profitable until just a few years ago. So that's a moot point. Chad, he says, Hotep God mod. What up, Chad? Appreciate you, homie. Boy, cut it. You want to buy weed without being traced. Use cash on the block. You are trying to dumb people down. Brendan Lee, decentralization comes from big blocks. A 10 terabyte block is worth 1 million a month.
Real quick, Hotep,
more than to join the network. Right. This is always a design. J709, go back to math class if you think 2 gigabytes every 10 minutes is sustainable like BSV fake Toshi want. Derek Moore, why won't transnational corporations decentralize Bitcoin more than hobbyists when there are more technically competent transnational corporations than there are technically competent hobbyists? It's an interesting question.
That's true. Mm-hmm. Well, that was my entire point.
You worked at a large company,
oh my God.
Except for like a company like Google or Facebook in the tech sector. Like, the tech is not just, oh, you're a big company, so you're good at tech. If your company's market specialty is not technology, I guarantee your IT department is incompetent as fuck. Just look back in the news for 20 years. Like,
which is why we should move the security of the internet to Bitcoin. That's the entire. You're right. IT people are incompetent. We should move the entire security model of the internet to Bitcoin. Number one. Number two.
What?
Yes.
That doesn't make any
Bitcoin
coherent
should
sense. What do you?
power the internet. This is what we want to do. We want to actually have the Bitcoin blockchain powering applications. And to answer Hotep's question from earlier, what does this do for average people? It means that you as an average individual can build a large-scale company that usually historically has required large data centers and a lot of money to start up. You can build that yourself, whether you're a kid in Africa or a kid in the United States. You can build a large-scale data application and anyone can use it. That is the beautiful thing of Bitcoin.
The question I was going to ask you guys: what about when quantum computing comes around and they can break the blocks?
It's a scam. Quantum computing is a scam.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. And if anybody is likely to actually create quantum computing, it would be miners, because they have the incentive to create the most efficient way to deal with data.
Yeah, good point.
Can I ask a question to Connor? So you're talking about putting all information that's ever existed on the blockchain.
Yes.
Is that in the white paper?
The white paper describes an economic system, and if I want to put data on the blockchain, a miner can choose whether or not to put it into the blockchain. That is the entire point of Bitcoin.
Right. The U.S. Constitution created the internet.
Yes.
Do you think
exactly.
Satoshi's vision? So, do you think Satoshi's vision was to create better money, or do you think it was to put every piece of information ever that existed on a blockchain? The problem I have with that, I'm really not asking. I don't really want an answer because it's so preposterously stupid to even consider putting every piece of information that ever existed on a blockchain and then to say that adds some kind of truth to it. No, it doesn't. Anyone can put anything there and they can lie. Colin, one of the worst problems about debating with you is that you consistently interrupt people.
Sorry.
You just don't let them finish. Just let people finish and listen to what
you
they're
do the
saying.
same thing, but yes.
No, I don't. I've sat here silently for nearly 3 hours, okay? And I've very occasionally dipped in. So that's just a fucking lie, okay? It's preposterous and stupid to put every kind of bit of information up on a blockchain and then say this is suddenly truthful. No, it's not. The implementation, the point of putting the information on the blockchain, that could have been a lie. It could have been a bad actor. To talk about following somebody's life and putting everything they've ever done and who they've worked with again on a blockchain is preposterous and stupid beyond belief. I have no idea why you're.
The fact that you can't trust it.
I made that point earlier.
Can I answer the question though, real quick? You asked a question.
Don't answer the question because it's a bad question.
No, it's a great question. I think it's a fantastic question. Why did Satoshi Nakamoto introduce op push data 4, which allows you to put 4.8 gigabytes of data into a transaction? If Bitcoin was not meant to have large amounts of data in the blockchain, why did Satoshi Nakamoto put an opcode that allows 4.8 gigabytes of data to be pushed in one single transaction?
Connor, because a lot of the opcodes
he's not around, so who knows?
Broken. But also
he's completely irrelevant now.
Okay, so there's no answer for it. Thank you. Yes.
No, Connor. I literally.
Do you have any of your own ideas, or do you just regurgitate everything that Satoshi wrote?
I don't want to reinvent Bitcoin. Right. I think Bitcoin worked as it was created. I'm not trying to play tyrannical dictator and reinvent Bitcoin like everyone in BTC is.
If we were discussing intentions, of the United States government, we should start at the Constitution.
We're losing cohesion here. So I'm gonna hop back in here and cut this off. Finish my super chats because y'all acting like some hoes. Is it easier to build business on BSV or BTC? Location area, 100 different companies equals EOS. Coin Alchemist, the only thing Shinobi is blowing equals stop and decrypt. Brendan Lee, signing with the digital signature means you said it. That's true. A1, blah, 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 blah. According to BTC, core data is useless. Okay, so everyone stop using the internet. Rob D, I just put Brenna Sparks on the blockchain. I don't know what that means. Joshua Petty.
Google it. You'll know next time.
I bet. Fun fact, Twitch Inc. BSV app profitable from day one. Yeah, because they're ripping everybody off. River, Peter, think bigger. Your mind is far too small. And one play 5. They shook. Chrono Bear, $10. Thank you. Jacob Satowski, would you rather have a checkbook or an Xbox? A checkbook. Derek Moore, all information that can be afforded to be put on. All information that can afford to be put on. Yeah, all information that can afford to be on. Good point, Derek Moore. You have to pay for this shit. Chrono Bear, another 50. MX, whatever that is. Timestamps prove existence, not content. Kami Shinobi.
Yeah,
Here's
that's
the thing.
literally what I said. Is all they do is prove existence, and
Yeah.
you can also use a single transaction for literally infinite amounts of data. But real quick, I want to go back to because it kind of got messy when I was trying to jump in. But Connor, I literally quoted you the Satoshi post at the start of this show where Satoshi himself said, "Take your bit DNS system and put it on its own blockchain." Because all this other non-money shit shouldn't be in the Bitcoin blockchain. That is literally something Satoshi himself said. So if you're going to keep arguing to Satoshi's authority, he's literally telling you you're wrong.
Okay, yeah. So actually, that's the one thing. Actually, his quote is not specifically what you said. I can read his quote if you'd like me to, but you're conflating two different things. Okay.
You know
Connor
everything
is
he
the
ever
real
said at any
Satoshi.
point.
Yes, Peter. I've actually read what he wrote. You should try it. It would help you understand what he created.
Yeah,
It'd be
dude,
a
I read
novel
it.
Idea.
I read it and then life
Historian-
moved on.
To be a historian is a legitimate practice. Just FYI, you can do that for a career.
And I listen, Shinobi. There's nothing stopping me from building a second layer on top of Bitcoin that runs a DNS service and maybe hashes things on chain. Again, Satoshi wasn't a dictator. He was not a tyrannical person dictating the rules of the system. He created a capitalist system that allows market actors to determine what they want to do with the system.
So what he said doesn't matter. What the market decides is what should happen. Exactly. We agree now. Thanks.
I think in 2010, it was smart of Satoshi to ask people not to put a DNS system on top of Bitcoin. But like he said in his original emails, the entire point of Bitcoin was to scale into server farms. And once you have Bitcoin into server farms and you have companies
The
like
mining
Amazon,
equipment,
yes, nodes, yes. Once you have companies like Amazon, Google,
miners.
Apple, all of these companies using the Bitcoin blockchain to power their applications, then you have a distributed system of servers that allow big data applications for any person to build.
They won't.
Dude, here's the
Apple will
thing,
not
like, Connor,
running
like,
things.
We don't know what they will or will not
You've
do.
done
The internet
startups
was
before,
absurd in the
Hotep,
70s.
right? Like Hotep, like you've done startups. So let's walk through this business here. Okay, like a blockchain that you keep like cheap to shove shit in. So you're effectively centrally planning the fees. Just bloats. It's being subsidized. So does it seem rational to you for all the Fortune 500 companies of the world to just sink all of their money into building stuff on a subsidized platform that's not actually economically sustainable? Do you think that's reasonable? They're going to do that? That makes any sense to use something like that?
This was the argument against putting plumbing into cities that existed before plumbing existed. It's the same kind of gigantic sunk cost that people can't understand until perhaps a generation later. Like,
and it just so happens that Bitcoin lets us do microtransactions and actually pay for things. There's economics built into it. You can pay for things. That's the beautiful
there's
part about
economics
Bitcoin.
built into plumbing too. That's the point.
Exactly.
The point is
has
that
a
there is a
cost.
giant sunk cost that has a massive spillover benefit that we just completely ignore today. It's the same thing with railroads. It's the same thing with telecom. I wouldn't want to be the guy to invent the first telegraph wires that went across the country. It's a huge cost. And most people would say nobody would do that. That's completely insane. It's an unreasonable use of capital. Nobody's going to use these. Nobody understands the technology. Who's going to use a telegraph?
No, it's not an unrealistic use of capital. It's a stupid decision. Like, why would you use a blockchain over a database?
Why would you use a telegraph instead of homing pigeons that were
I'm
trained
running
You've
a
not made something
business
better.
that keeps track of users' information. I'm handling all this private information of people, like running their stuff. Now, what makes sense? I put that in my server, or I just throw it on a blockchain and hope somebody out there stores it somewhere and has the data connectivity and the bandwidth to give it to me when I need it.
Can BSV answer McCormack's question?
What is the question?
What is the advantage of putting your information on a blockchain over a database? Again, me as somebody who might want to build a business, I've got a choice here. Do I use a database or do I use a blockchain? What is the advantage of the blockchain for me as a business?
It's the same thing that you said about buying marijuana for your mother. You can monetize the information however you deem fit without using the existing channels. I don't have to go through Google or YouTube's, all of their channels of everything else to distribute content that has value to people that are willing to pay for that value. It's a completely different paradigm.
So I don't have to. If I wanted to create some content, I can create a website, and I don't have to use Google. So I can put it up there and monetize it if I want. How does a blockchain? What does that solve differently?
Immutability is a very obvious one.
Why do I want immutability? I say some stupid shit. I want to delete it sometimes.
I want immutability to call you out on your stupid shit.
Maybe the government wants to censor
so you
your
want
content.
immutability. I don't. This is about me and my business. I don't want immutable. I've got stuff I say which is fucking stupid. I want it deleted. So why do I want immutability? You want it. I don't.
You can do that with Bitcoin.
Yeah, but why do I want to mute? Again, you've not told me why would I use a blockchain? You wouldn't, because the reality is anyone with half a brain knows a blockchain is a terrible database. Okay, it's a fucking terrible database. No, it is a terrible database because it's slow.
You're saying that because people told you that there's a scaling problem that Satoshi always said was a fake scaling problem.
I don't care about what Satoshi said. He's not around anymore.
You're just making things up. You're saying that there's a scaling problem. There's never been a scaling problem.
There are scaling problems.
There's not.
How is Bitcoin going to? I'm sorry. How is the blockchain going to operate faster than a database or better than a database?
Well, it is a database.
It won't.
Right, it is a database. So let's clarify that.
And Kurt, real quick, the thing
a traditional database.
Because the people that are holding the database are economically incentivized to have higher connectivity and to have robustness. Meaning
is it currently faster now to run an app on the blockchain?
No.
Well, faster
it's the same thing.
There's a lot of ways that you could parse this out, actually. So
yeah, I mean, let's not play with the words. Is it faster or not?
It's the same. No. It's the exact same.
It's a thing. It is a database that is on the internet.
I saw somebody, they posted an MP3 on the blockchain music.
Right.
Took a while to load.
Yeah, sure. So large data right now. Yeah. I mean, a video on the blockchain is going to be slower today, but that's why we need to scale the blockchain.
So it's slower.
But Hotep, to answer your question, for the last 10 years, no one has focused on scaling the blockchain. It wasn't until 2018 that people actually looked at scaling the blockchain. So, I mean, we're 10 years behind building the infrastructure to build a robust Bitcoin.
You just said there's no scaling problems.
There isn't. So when Satoshi released the code, you can go back to his original commit, version 0.1. He said we need to parallelize the code. No one parallelized the code until 2018. People started doing it. So the scaling problem is made up because everyone thinks that the blockchain can't scale, when again we were told from the very beginning it can scale. So Peter, you just repeat this.
If you put all of Spotify, so if you put the entirety of Spotify on the BSV blockchain, I don't know how many songs, you put the entirety of Spotify on the blockchain, okay? What's going to happen? Are you going to have a decentralized blockchain that propagates with speed?
So who hosts Spotify's data right now?
I have no idea. Literally no idea.
Spotify hosts Spotify's data. So our vision in Bitcoin is to bring every single large company into the Bitcoin blockchain. There's infrastructure for this stuff already.
Spotify has to run Netflix's and Google's.
So what will be the size of the block? Spotify puts their entire.
Sorry. There's a lot
but like
of
so in your world, Spotify not only has to maintain Spotify's database, but Facebook's and Google's and Netflix and YouTube and all the other shit, because they have to run a BSV node now because that's where they put their database. So how does that make sense that now a business built on BSV has to literally duplicate the data of every business on BSV instead of just their own? How does that make economic sense?
That's not what
Why would Spotify pay to run a node that stores Netflix and YouTube and Google and everything on it too? That makes no sense.
Economies of scale function in databases the same way. AWS is priced the way that it is because of the number of users. Is it not? AWS doesn't function in an economic space?
Dude, there's a thing called physics. And when a hard drive gets bigger, there's more space that the electricity has to travel to move the data. So the bigger the thing gets, the more latency and time it takes to move shit around. That is physics. No, economy of scale doesn't magically just negate physics.
So Shinobi, blockchains are just on other people's computers. So we're still talking about the same hardware that could function in any regard, except for there's an economic incentive to build better hardware if you're serving it off of a blockchain. So they have more incentives to be
So it does negate physics?
So maybe we can explain this to Hotep.
Just stops working.
Hang on. Let's explain this to Hotep. So listen, if I'm a miner, so the way Bitcoin works, miners are mining blocks. So they want to find a block and then propagate the block to the rest of the network. If everyone builds on top of that block, they get the block reward, right? That means that a miner, for the first time in any network's history, is directly incentivized to make their connectivity as high as possible, to be as high bandwidth as possible, because that means I earn a ton of money if I propagate my block faster than my competitors. We for the first time have a network that incentivizes more storage, higher connectivity, better bandwidth, all of the above. We have a network that incentivizes a more robust and higher connected network. This is what everyone doesn't understand. You are just assuming that because I think it's just because you don't think companies are profit motivated, or you just don't like companies, think that this isn't a reality. This is how Bitcoin makes a better system for the entire world. We incentivize a better network.
Connor, like what you're saying is that this proof of work is magically going to make a design for a hard drive where electrons move faster than the laws of physics say they should move. And it's going to magically make the revenue Spotify gets for serving just the Spotify data somehow pay for hosting Google and YouTube's data too. Like that makes no sense, dude. None at all.
So there's something called
It was
Moore's Law.
impossible to build an airplane until it was built, and then within a generation there were jet engines. And every step is impossible. There's always people that say you absolutely can't solve that problem because physics. And the fact of the matter is that where there's a profit motive and where there is an entrepreneur that believes that he can be the first to do it, these things occur. This is why we have a capitalist system that creates these incentives to give us the world that we want to see. Like, why would you not want to get behind somebody who says, you know what, I'm going to get to the plate, I'm going to swing for the damn fences, as
Okay,
opposed to just sit there and say, nope, impossible. Nobody can do it. Nobody controls.
Shinobi, give me a sec.
I am a
Right.
hardcore capitalist. I am a hardcore capitalist. But like the idea that capitalism just magically starts like just breaking rules
Spurs
of
innovation.
the universe is nonsense. Like capitalism doesn't magically change the nature of the physical world. It just helps motivate us towards using it more efficiently.
Dude, we're not saying that Spotify needs to hold all of Amazon's data or any. That's not what anyone is saying. Applications don't need to host the entire blockchain.
So they don't run a node and somebody else hosts all of Spotify's data for them?
Miners
agree on what
run nodes. This is what you're not understanding. And miners could be locked in smart contracts with a distributed system of data storage centers that store parts of the blockchain. You think so small about Bitcoin.
Oh my god!
And then you do this high-pitched screech.
Oh my god!
Cooperate.
It is fucking dumb.
Spread like
Why
Alright,
is it dumb,
listen.
Peter? Tell me why it's
Split a
dumb.
node up.
Let's
You
go,
don't have
McCormack and then Kurt.
Okay. So what I'm going to say is, okay, you have an economic system where people can choose to run stuff on the BSV blockchain if they want, and we have an economic system where they don't even have to choose between blockchains. They can choose between creating something on a traditional database. They could use AWS. They can create their own data center. There's all these different opportunities at the moment. Okay, outside of people who are being funded by Calvin Air, pretty much no one's building anything on the BSV system. There is a reason why, because it's fucking dumb.
Is he allowed just to
It's
make things
absolutely
up
dumb.
and state them as facts? Because that's just objectively wrong. Again, Peter, this is my actual problem with you. You run a podcast that you tout as the most downloaded thing, and then you just say things that are factually incorrect. And that's why I think
how many times have you just said you just made that up with no qualification? How many times have you just claimed central control without actually?
I'm building a business on top of Bitcoin. There's countless applications being built on top of Bitcoin. So what Peter
Bitcoin
is
SV.
saying is making
Bitcoin SV.
Yeah, Bitcoin. So
Bitcoin SV.
Peter's just making things up again.
No,
That's
you
why-
are. You're calling it Bitcoin, but it's Bitcoin SV. So you're just making something up.
Bitcoin.
Plain
Bitcoin SV.
and
Can we
simple.
go to Kurt?
We want to keep
Free
this
market.
going, but we're hitting a wall, I think.
Yeah, I want to go to Kurt, and then we're gonna handle some super chats. So this is how we're gonna go. We're gonna go to Kurt. We're gonna handle some super chats. Then we're gonna answer my questions, and then we're gonna wrap this thing up.
Yes, free markets have made the impossible possible for absolutely ever. We live in a world that looks absolutely magical compared to the people that lived just 2 generations ago. And the reason is because every person that created something took his criticisms, took the criticisms that were given to him where people said this is physically impossible, nobody can do that, and he said, screw you, I'm going to put everything I've got into giving it a shot. And if he succeeded, then we all got to benefit from it. If he failed by himself. And I think that's okay. But the fact of the matter is that we revere people that show up and take massive risks, because it's an important aspect of us moving from whatever we were to whatever we can be. And acting like these things are just fundamentally impossible, that hardware can't do things that we need them to do. I mean, even having this conversation 10 years ago versus today, we're talking about exponential growth and efficiency from when the Bitcoin white paper was written. And so the things that Satoshi said 10 years ago are exponentially more true today about the ability to scale with existing hardware, because the hardware has gotten exponentially more efficient.
It hasn't.
Moore's law.
How much more powerful is the desktop computer of today versus 10 years ago? It is not exponentially better. Like,
So
you
Moore's
are
law
living
is
an imaginary fantasy.
Computer is unusable today compared to a brand new computer, because they have gotten exponentially more efficient, both from a physical, from a hardware standpoint, and a software standpoint, because great minds have pushed it forward, period.
Yeah, I remember putting like 30 disks into the computer
Hold on.
to download software. So we're gonna go to super chats. As we planned. Dave Mullenmer, $10. Thank you, bro. He said the truth machine is misunderstood by the BTC guys. It's not like someone would upload XYZ happen and text on chain. Imagine your iPhone's geolocation data on chain, big data, but private owned. That's kind of scary. I don't know if I want my geolocation on the chain. And one play 5. I'm honestly disappointed, to be honest. I thought the BTC core guys are more educated than this. Shaking my head. Happy Viking 888. One shot every time kind of referred to the white paper. I'd be drunk by now. Jimmy Odom, $2. He said, please articulate why Twitch is bad, please. No, I won't. You can go look at my tweet. I already broke that down, and they still owe me a check for that tweet. Locationary. What Connor wants is EOS. It's literally run by 100. Coin Alchemist, a blockchain is a database, Peter. Dave Mullenmer, Peter, you choose a blockchain over a database probably owned by Bezos because you can own your data and monetize it with microtransactions. Bitcoin invented this 0 to 1 innovation. And one play 5, bro, a blockchain is a database. Chrono Bear, has Peter figured out how to plug in his Raz Pi yet? Yeah, they coming at Peter neck. Peter, you must be popular, bro. I'm definitely.
Dude, listen, I'm gonna give you an answer to that as well afterwards.
All right. Ken, what would be the incentive for large companies to use blockchain instead of their current infrastructures in place? Brendan Lee, apps don't need blockchain to function. Rule Duke, I finally understood BSV stupidity. They are blockchain perpetual motion advocates. I finally get it. Fanaticists. Derek Moore, Bitcoin, a permanent log for event source systems. Jacob Satowski, there are hundreds of apps on BSV. That means nothing, Jacob. Gabriel M., the universe is expanding and speeding up. Obviously, humans do not understand physics completely yet. Good point, Gab. Jefferson Colonel, is USSD faster than your HDD, Shinobi? I guess he was trying to say. Riku, all Bitcoin needs to be successful. All Bitcoin needs to be successful is to survive. Big blocks weaken Bitcoin and make it easier to kill. Store your data on a chain. So now we're going to go to Peter. I believe he wanted to address a question. Give me a second. Let me just get your screen back up because Shinobi dropped out, and I just want to make sure that the people get to hear your answer. And then we're going to go into my personal questions that I need answered, and then we're going to wrap this thing up.
Cool.
Okay. So again, I'm just going to come back to my point that I keep making is that most of the people don't care about this shit. Okay. So I've architected a show which is meant to deal with the mass groups of people. Anything you see me tweet about, I'm probably going to be making a show 2 to 3 weeks later. So for example, with nodes, I did a show with Luke Dasher when he talked about the number of people that need to be running nodes, and we're way off that. So I as somebody who's been a UX designer, said, okay, let's approach this for why people might not, and put out a bunch of tweets. The problem you have with techies, and most of the people involved in Bitcoin, debating Bitcoin, they're nerds. I used to run a web development agency, and the developers brilliant guys, really good at making shit, but we would never let them in front of the clients because they're patronizing. They are unable to actually articulate themselves in a way that's kind of makes the client feel okay. So we'd always have somebody in between, like a business manager. What we have in this world is a whole bunch of nerds who want to insult people who don't understand these very difficult technical concepts. So we actually need to get to a place where we can try and understand and help people. So the thing about nodes, of course I can set a fucking node up. I engineer my show. I coded my website. I do the SEO, of course. But that doesn't help anyone. So what I did is I put out all the things. So if there's a book by Steve Krug called Don't Make Me Think, where he actually tells you to list the things that you, every time you have a question in your head, because a question is a stumbling block. So I did that for nodes. And then we got a show out of nodes. And now people are debating nodes. Now people are talking about nodes in presentations. That was the design of that. See, what you've got, the problem is you've got a bunch of nerds who rather want to just to attack people and might go, oh, Pete's a moron, Pete's stupid, he can't run a node, than actually see how a show is being architected, how it's being approached to actually help people. And this is a problem. So what we have is all these fucking nerds having these big intellectual debates about shit that 99% of people who use Bitcoin do not give a fuck about. They do not care, do not understand, do not have the time to. They're not getting involved in iPhone and Android debates about the tech inside. They're watching TV ads and buying the one that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay?
Awesome.
That's the real world.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Thank you for that. So now I'm going to go into my questions. And this is a question for everybody. How do we know this thing wasn't built by the NSA and not some dude named Satoshi?
I don't think it matters if it does. Incentives. The incentives are such that it doesn't matter. If the NSA was creating something to be oppressive, it would not look like Bitcoin.
I would be surprised the NSA built
To
a
track
capitalist
every
system.
transaction isn't good.
There's privacy built into the concept of the whole thing. So you have privacy in how you do business and who you do business with, but there's also the ability to track back if something awful has happened, that you can put work back into the network and say, okay, who were the people that did this awful thing? But there has to be work that goes into it.
Who's got more resources, the top 1% communists or the people? Who's more likely to build massive mining farms and dictate the future of these blockchains? The people at the top or the hoi polloi?
Seriously, Hotep, I seriously think there is a very real possibility the NSA did build Bitcoin. That's why I want it small. I want it lean. And I want as much of that shit people are doing, moving money around, to be off that chain where they can't see shit as possible. Because if they did, wouldn't it make sense that they would want to shove everything into a giant data center where only they get to watch and track everything, where they get to see who's connecting to the server and which coins they're asking about? That's why I'm so against that direction, because that's exactly what somebody like the NSA would want, whether they made it or not.
That's actually incorrect, because the NSA, so actually if you go look at the Snowden documents, the ones that are not very public, but they're the ones that are out there, you can go research to them. The NSA was actually a big proponent of actually promoting people to use Tor. And the reason why is because they wanted to actually mask their own activity on top of Tor. So anonymity, so there's an old story called The Ring of Gyges by Plato. Anonymity is actually, it benefits those in power more than it benefits us. Now, do we benefit from some anonymity in today's corrupt system? Of course. But large-scale anonymity actually benefits those in power more than us. So the NSA is actually incentivized to not create a system that is fully traceable and allows freedom for every single person that uses it.
But here's the thing, Connor. You can only track what people are doing if you have a whole copy of the chain. So if it's only them with the copy of the chain, nobody can track them. Only they can track other people. That's the whole point.
Again, I believe in companies. I believe that companies are a good thing. And I believe that large-scale companies are going to be incentivized to build these systems. And I don't think it's going to be centralized in the hands of a few people, because I don't believe that monopolies are a real thing if you study economics.
Well, right. And the incentives, this is funny. Every time, Terminator is one of my favorite movies. And this is this discussion about some massive piece of technology becoming evil, or believing that the most efficient thing to do is exterminate all people. And the thing that I don't like about Terminator is that I believe that Skynet would rather create a really efficient business that it could interface with so that it could have better connections to both other machines and humans. And the fact that we believe that anybody functions outside of a basic incentive structure, like the NSA is made up of people, and ultimately those people have their own needs, and they have the incentive to do business the way that they see fit as individuals. So like I said, like all of these things create incentives for us to connect to each other better. And if it didn't work, it would fail. Like if Bitcoin just did nothing but harm me economically, I just wouldn't use it.
Well, what about the fact that China has these massive mining farms and they're blatantly communist nation?
Sure.
Like, doesn't that give them more power than they should within the Bitcoin community?
But they still have the incentive to push that value out. Like they're putting a bunch of capital into that mining. And if they don't get the capital out because people don't want to use it because the product is garbage or it's oppressive in some way, then it's just a waste of their time and money too. They can be communists they want on paper, but they still got to eat, and they're not going to just starve to death to be oppressive.
You got anything on that, Rick? Peter?
I'm sorry, I was just plugging my phone in. I missed that bit. What was the question?
I was asking about the whole NSA conspiracy theory, about them creating. Any thoughts on that or not?
I mean, there's no way I can know. It's not an important thing to me right now.
Okay. Next question. And my last question. Alex Jones talks about the future of the digital currency and the erasure of physical currency. And when I look at Bitcoin, I think that's a valid concern that we're moving away from physical. So I'm going to ask you guys, I guess this is a two-part question. Why is Bitcoin better than physical? And do you think that there's a threat to erase our physical currency? Because as you can see, they're making me pay taxes on this Bitcoin, but I don't pay taxes on my cash. The Greeks, they make all their transactions in raw cash. The Greek people around here, they make all their transactions in raw cash so they can have tax avoidance. Bitcoin ain't gonna allow me to do that.
Dude, there's ways to move like Bitcoin without doing stuff on chain physically. Like there's this device called the Open Dime, and it generates the private public key on the device, and you actually have to break like a tamper-proof seal in the circuit to get that key off, and you can check to make sure that's broke. So like you can put Bitcoin on one of those and just pass that shit around like cash, and it's not leaving a trail anywhere. Like you can do stuff like that with Bitcoin.
But I can take my cash and I can put it underneath my mattress. I can touch it. It's there. The power grid still got my cash.
Yeah, but if the power grid goes down, nobody wants that cash, man. You got water, food, bullets.
I mean, of course, of course, you want guns, but when the power comes back, I still want my cash.
Yeah, that Bitcoin's still going to be there, man. I mean, all it takes is one copy of that chain, and
what about taxes and the IRS?
I mean, dude, that's like that's the game you got to play, man.
So Hotep, here's what we can do. Here's what we can do. Okay, so we can tokenize the entire volume of US dollar on the Bitcoin blockchain. So now you at least know that the cash isn't getting inflated. And then we can still have physical assets that are tied to the blockchain that you can exchange peer-to-peer. So you can still have physical cash, but it actually has the benefit of being tied, tokenized to the blockchain. So you know that the currency isn't getting inflated, for example.
Are you okay with physical cash disappearing?
I think that physical cash is going to disappear no matter what. And I think that Bitcoin is our best digital currency that we can have. I think no matter what happens, digital or governments don't want physical cash, so it's going to be up to them anyway because they control all of the currencies, right? So I think, I think physical cash is a great thing, but it's going to go away no matter what. Governments are going to decree it. So Bitcoin's the best digital cash we have.
I think if you get rid of physical cash, you're going to have a black market for physical cash because it's discriminatory. You need some form of physical cash.
Physical cash. If it disappears, people just make physical cash with Bitcoin.
Yeah, right.
People want it.
Well, people trade whatever. They'll trade bullets or grain or whatever. Like if you need to do an illicit black market transaction, you'll just trade something else of value for whatever it is you want.
Yeah.
So
it discriminates against the poor, and it discriminates. It's just discriminatory. Every society where they've removed, I think there's a place in certain parts of Sweden where they've removed physical cash. Like they've got discrimination problems now. There's no charity because you can't give money to homeless people. It's fucking bullshit. One thing I will say though, Hotep, when you refer to things like taxes and such, It depends where you think your belief is. Craig Wright firmly believes that Bitcoin is he's basically government friendly. He's a full fucking statist. He wants to create a blockchain that gives everything, all the information to the government of what you do. So if you misbehave against the government rules, that you can get arrested. I mean, that's what he wants his chain to be.
No, it's he recognizes that it's a reality. That's the difference.
He wants that.
But listen, no, Peter. The thing is,
competitive difference.
No,
he wants government to become a paper tiger. Connor, if I can.
Yeah,
if government doesn't have the ability to hide information, then they lose their ability to be evil. Like, I would agree that the centralized states of everywhere on the planet are essentially in variances of how evil they are. But the reason for it is that they have the ability to hide what they're doing. And if they don't have the ability to hide what they're doing, then they become a paper tiger. So you're shining a light on the state, which makes them...
No, slightly different. Let's be honest. So he cried like a baby in court because he said that people were using Bitcoin for illicit purposes. Like, the Silk Road is so terrible. Anybody, again, with half a brain cell knows drug prohibition hasn't worked. That actually, two outcomes of the Silk Road. Firstly, you had harm reduction because people got a purer product because you had a fair system of reviews. So that's the first point. You also reduced violence from the system because there was no meeting point between the buyer and the seller. Every single study by every independent group, just go and read what the Drug Policy Alliance said this is a better system. Apart from Craig Wright disagrees. He thinks this was bad for Bitcoin. So he's a fucking statist.
It's certainly bad PR. I mean, given it, like,
in whose book? Whose book? It's good PR.
I think it really depends where you're coming from in the issue. I don't know that a majority of the people think of the Silk Road as a net positive to the real world.
If you don't think that's positive, you're uneducated. You're uneducated.
I actually agree. I actually agree with your points, Peter. But I'm saying that from a PR standpoint,
you're educated.
I think from a PR standpoint, it's a net negative. The Silk Road ended in murder and theft and everything else.
No, it didn't end in murder and theft. Again, you're spreading lies. What murder?
Hand. Putting all this aside, did you know that Craig Wright was building a banking business in Australia and he was denied a license by the government and they cited Silk Road as a reason?
No, the guy told so many lies.
These are facts.
No idea.
I know.
No, you say
this
facts.
Is why,
okay, he's just a compulsive liar.
You don't want to hear the facts about him.
No, I don't, really because he's a liar, he's a moron, he's a fraud, and he's suing me.
Question here from the audience.
So fuck him.
I have a really good question here from the audience. Derek Moore, Satoshi worked for the NSA, but this guy, Rique Caballero, he says the IRS and the CIA just took down child pornography ring by de-anonymizing BTC transactions. Is that true, guys?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
So wait, whoa, y'all just told me it was anonymous.
No.
Bitcoin is not anonymous.
I never said
anonymous.
Let me explain. Let me describe the difference between privacy and anonymity because they're often screwed up. Privacy is something that you do in your own home. For example, it's something that you're doing that is not affecting anybody outside. That's privacy. Anonymity is something that you are doing exterior that may have a consequence to someone else, but your identity is hidden. So they're very different things.
So my identity is public on the blockchain with my BTC?
No, what your money is doing is. But your identity is not tied to it.
And the existence of the wallets and the balance of the wallets is public. However, who owns each wallet may or may not be private, depending on how the coins became yours.
Ah, gotcha.
Yes. So me and you right now can generate wallets, and only me and you can know what the addresses are. And we can do business back and forth. Nobody knows it's me and you. But if I bought those coins from, say, Coinbase, and they have my ID on file, well, then they know it's at least me doing business. And then if you go to cash out at some point, they may take your KYC information, and then they know it was me and you doing business back and forth the whole time.
I got you.
But if we never participate in the KYC process, then me and you can do private business forever, potentially.
Oh, so these people were idiots.
Kurt, that is actually a pretty good breakdown, man.
Thank you.
Dope. This was sponsored by CoinBitsApp.com. We sell Bitcoin. It only costs $1. The only fee is $1 for every transaction. $1. You know I'm going to share my app. Yo, guys, great freaking discussion today. Everybody did great. My mind is I wouldn't say made up. I wouldn't say that my mind is made up. I would say that
Could we hear your thoughts, your closing thoughts about both sides?
yeah, I'm trying to
Hey, don't pressure him, man. Let him do his thing.
Oh no.
No, I'm doing this. Is like let him make his mind up, man.
I have a newfound respect for BTC. I'll say that. I have a newfound respect for BTC. Going into this, I thought BTC was going to get their ass whooped. And I'll say that they didn't get their ass whooped. I can't say that they won because I think both sides made very great arguments. I think Shinobi's super knowledgeable. I think Connor and Kurt are super knowledgeable. I think Kurt's probably the most level-headed guy here. I think
I'd agree with that.
I think Peter is has the most personality here. I think is a very important voice to this space. I think
That's what I want to win.
I think the problem here is that I see bitchiness in the crypto space. I feel like you guys are arguing, whereas y'all should be working together.
I agree.
That's
we should definitely not be working together with these people.
I'm not saying you guys should be working together on the products. You guys should be working together to grow this space. You guys should be working together
That's the
to
thing.
prevent this space from being taken over by the communists. And I think you guys should shake hands instead of blocking each other and all that type of stuff. I think you guys should work together because it's going to be power in numbers. People don't understand this space. And all of your minds are important to this discussion.
There is no space.
I mean, like
the space is a myth.
That's like
The space
that's
is
like
not a
trying
myth.
to say.
The space just donated I don't know how much money to me. The space is not a myth. That money's real.
I think what he's saying,
The
Hotep,
space
is
is a
there
myth.
is no single community here. There is no single goal or ideology.
That's false. That's patently false. If I can market to it, it's a demographic. It's a space.
Well, I'll give you a demographic, but a demographic don't mean we all have the same view on it.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's just a space.
Disagree on the definitions of words.
No, I just said I agree with him. Like,
This is a particular market. The people that are in this chat are not probably Coinbase users. They're probably way more savvy on these things, way more than I am, probably way more than McCormack. But they are sharing a space, which is why we're talking to each other, which is why we're here, which is why the people in the chat arguing with each other, which is why people on Twitter are arguing with each other. Y'all are in a space. Y'all in crypto Twitter. Y'all together. Y'all one family. And the more y'all
them all.
I'm in Bitcoin
about it, the easier it is for the communists to come in and override this space. So, it's fine to disagree. I just think that if you, and I say this about the black community too, and I say this about the conservatives, but I think if people choose to find what we have in common as opposed to what we find different, things will get better.
You know what? I can understand that in politics. I get that, but this isn't the same to me.
Now, I'm not talking about
different.
politics. I'm talking about nation building or community building.
But I think
anytime you want to. Go ahead, McCormack.
So I think fundamentally what they're doing is actually damaging, and it's verging on criminal.
How?
Okay, so firstly, going out and suing people and saying you're going to bankrupt people and doxing people. Okay, that is absolutely fucking terrible. And these are the dictator leaders of their project. And on top of that, these people are liars and they are frauds. Okay, they're actually proven liars and proven frauds, and they're being celebrated.
So let me ask you this. Satoshi doesn't matter to Bitcoin.
Nope.
Therefore, Craig shouldn't matter to BSV.
Yeah.
But he does. That's the point. He does. He's held up as their leader, and his word is gospel, and he's promoted as Satoshi.
You made the argument that Satoshi and his white paper don't matter to BTC, so Craig shouldn't matter to BSV. I think your beef is personal and has nothing to do.
Yeah, he's suing me. No,
all right, you guys have a lot of personal beef. So
Kurt, what have I done this personal? Like, point out where I've hung up on a person or a figure instead of making a conceptual argument. Because as far as I remember,
you haven't. I think Connor's the one that's more of like a Satoshi. I think Connor is Satoshi.
If I could just explain, I mean, I understand I mention the white paper all the time and what Satoshi wrote, but to me, I think that this whole thing is just something we don't understand very well. So to me, if I want to learn about it,
You have to speak for yourself there.
I'd like to go to the person who created it and try and understand what they were thinking at the time.
Right.
This is what I think bothers me about this idea that we should just, fuck Satoshi, forget him. He clearly understood this very brand new thing that we're all still trying to learn about better than we did. So I'd like to actually understand what he thought about it first. And now what BTC has done is they said, screw that guy. He was wrong about all this stuff.
No.
And he doesn't matter at all. I think if you want to understand the system, we should look at the guy who created it first.
BTC doesn't say that. BTC doesn't say that. This is me saying it, right? I'm saying it.
Commonly, yeah. Sorry.
And by the way, I don't mean that in any way disrespectful. What I'm saying is, it is disingenuous of you to represent Satoshi's views and what you think he might think now. And you do that. You've repeatedly done that. You said, this is Satoshi's vision. This is what he meant. But you don't know that because words can be interpreted. And that's disingenuous.
Subjective statements can be interpreted, but he made a lot of objective statements, which is what I've read to you. I've read to you objective statements that he wrote. When he says, listen, when he says,
here's a question.
One more thing. When he says the intended configuration at large scale is for users not to run their own nodes, that's not a subjective thing I'm interpreting. That is him saying this is what the system is. That's a big difference.
Like you just say that like Bitcoiners just say fuck Satoshi. Like I've read every single word he's written, probably 10 times over. Nobody says fuck Satoshi. We say take what he got right and throw away what he got wrong. And so I want to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
When was the first comment or attitude put forward that this doesn't scale on chain and we need to layer out? When did that happen? When was the first time that was put forward?
Hal Finney.
As I recall, yeah.
It was James Donald. And it was literally one of the first replies to him posting the white paper on the cryptography mailing list. That attitude and assessment of that system has been present since literally before the system went live.
Yeah, there's been
this is not some kind of swooping in and a bunch of new people are changing things. That was an attitude. That was a way of seeing the system in the long term present from day one.
So, I agree that there were doubters from day one about Bitcoin. Yes, and I think that Satoshi was more innovative and smarter than James Donald.
No, not doubters, just people who saw a more intelligent way to scale the system out more in line with how all protocols in the history of computer science have been built up and scaled out.
And I'm saying the design that Satoshi created is a better protocol than any other network that's ever been created. And you can actually measure that as shown by the small world nature of the mining network.
I've got a question for you, Connor. Connor, I've got a question for you.
Okay.
Do you agree with everything Craig Wright says?
No.
Okay. Do you think he gets everything right?
No.
Okay, so why are you holding up his white paper, which you say he's wrote it as everything in there is right?
I think he understands a lot of things very well, and I think he understands economics, cryptography, computer science very well, and I think he put together something that's very special with the Bitcoin white paper and the Bitcoin design.
How did he build Bitcoin when he said he can't code?
He can code, and he taught.
No, he literally said in Amsterdam a couple of months ago, I can't fucking code.
He was being facetious
and saying he
can't.
No, I recall. No, he was saying
he's actually been proven that he can't code. He's been proven that he can't code. He copied and pasted code and got it wrong.
And most software people would look at Satoshi's code and say that it's poor code also. So Craig is bad.
Like he's literally been asked to provide code and got caught copying and pasting some demo code from Wikipedia to code.
I understand.
Yeah. Okay, and he got that wrong.
Can I ask BSV people? Can I ask the BSV people something? How do you feel about Craig? Is he cool, or is he? Y'all want him out to space?
So Dave Kleiman, there's an old email from Dave Kleiman, the judge in the Florida case ruled that it was a 50-50 partnership with Craig Wright, has this very interesting and cool email where he writes to the cryptography mailing list saying how helpful Craig Wright is in explaining concepts and how he would send Craig questions about networking, and Craig would respond with like a 5-page email and then a recipe for cookies. And he said that Craig Wright is the most helpful person I've ever met. And my own experience with Craig Wright is that he wants you to learn Bitcoin. He's an abrasive person. and he has a very abrasive personality. But if you are interested in learning about Bitcoin, he will go out of his way and spend hours of his day
So you
to
believe
explain concepts about Bitcoin.
You believe in him?
Well, you can verify the things he says.
No, I'm asking you, do you believe in him?
What does that even mean?
Do you co-sign him?
I disagree with things he says, but I think that he is right about Bitcoin.
As the creator of Bitcoin.
Yes, I would bet a large sum of money that he was involved in the creation of Bitcoin.
He said he did it on his own. He said it was on his own.
I think he was the designer of Bitcoin. I think he got help from his friend Dave Kleiman, and he also got help from a professor named David Rees, who was part of the Enigma project.
Kurt, is he Satoshi? Is Craig Satoshi?
I think that what Craig says about the history of what Satoshi is accurate. Like, I believe that when he talks about what Satoshi is, he was the person who created Satoshi, and that Satoshi was itself a group. So I believe that Craig is Satoshi in the sense that, Steve Jobs is Apple. Well, did Steve Jobs code and run all the manufacturing and all that? No, absolutely not. But Steve Jobs and Apple are very synonymous at their founding.
Craig said he did it on his own. He had no help.
And
he specifically said that on his blog. He said, I had no help.
But he has specifically talked about how Dave helped him and how Ray Dillinger helped and the nature of Hal Finney helping. Like, these are all things that he said.
So he contradicted himself? He got caught in a lie saying two different conflicting things at different times?
I think he was trying to win a court case against Dave Kleiman's brother. And so he made statements that probably were exaggerating or minimizing Dave Kleiman's effort in the Bitcoin development. And the last thing I'll say, it would be
he wanted to minimize his involvement.
It would be much easier for me to tell you that Craig Wright had nothing to do with Bitcoin, but to me, truth is more important than popularity. And the reality of it is that Craig Wright created Bitcoin.
Who builds a house?
Do you believe in freedom of speech?
Who builds a house? Is it the architect or is it the bricklayer?
It's the bricklayer. Build is a very specific word with a meaning, like physically building, constructing, not designing.
How about the job manager on site? But both people you could call builder. A job manager at a construction site could be called a builder as well. Like, these are all things that lack specific clarity.
Listen, Kurt, Craig isn't saying I was part of a team, I contribute. He is saying I am Satoshi. He's signing things as Satoshi. Okay,
yes.
He's being presented as Satoshi. He specifically said nobody helped him. I did this all on my own. Okay, and there's always contradictory statements.
Well,
let me ask you one more thing.
Paraphrasing.
Connor, do you believe in freedom of speech?
Yes.
You do. Okay, so why am I being sued?
I think that you should have lived in the United States where freedom of speech is protected.
But I don't. Tell me why I'm being sued in the UK.
Yeah, you committed a crime in the UK, which is libel.
Haven't committed a crime.
Libel is a crime.
What do you mean? What do you?
I haven't committed a crime.
What do you?
Libel is a crime.
For?
I haven't committed a libel though.
Why not?
I'm being sued. So when Moron Right was trying to dox Hodler I asked them to sue me to divert attention away. Okay, I just said sue me. He's a liar, he's a moron, he's a fraud. Just fucking sue me. And I thought also with my platform, my audience, we would be able to just take him down, be a much better thing. Okay, so you believe in BSV, but your great leader is you believe in freedom of speech, but your great leader is suing me.
I'm not saying I agree that someone should sue over freedom of speech.
Well, why don't you have a chat with your guy and say to him?
Because I think that you've antagonized him enough that I don't really care to defend you.
So in other words,
enjoy your hand jobs.
You're going to just shove your morals and your ethics down your throat whenever it benefits you, instead of consistently calling out somebody on your air quote team when they're doing something you disagree with.
Loyalty,
and that is a huge
I think what we got a case here. I think what we got is the case of loyalty over truth. I'm a type of person where I'm riding with my homie over the truth. So if that's the angle they choose, I could respect it.
No.
They got to come out and say that though.
I'm for truth, and Craig Wright isn't a fraud. That's why I disagree with Peter, because Craig Wright is not a fraud. Therefore, I am picking truth over any kind of loyalty to Peter. He's making things up when he says Craig Wright. He wants to fit into the popular crowd and say, "Look, Craig Wright's a fraud. Everyone follow me in my podcast."
No, hold on. You just made something up. Whoa. No, if you're gonna make stuff up, let's deal with that. I did what? I did this to go into the popular crowd. Okay, so you can talk to Hodler Not. All the conversations that me and him had exist. He was getting doxxed. I said I will get sued so we can get the documents public, so it's out there and everybody who's close to it knows this. I didn't do this to be in the popular crowd. My podcast was already number one. I'd already sold out all my ads, so I didn't have to do any of that. I did it because it was the right thing to do, because he is a liar, he is a fraud, and he is a moron, and he has morons like you perpetuating his lie and his fraud. And if you actually grew a pair of bollocks, you would see all the evidence that everyone else sees that this guy's a liar and a fraud. And you're going to go down on the wrong side of history of supporting a fraud. Do it, but you lack no bollocks.
Peter, it would be easier for me to agree with you. And that's
no,
the
it
thing.
doesn't. You've made something for yourself in a crowd of morons. You've made a place for yourself where you wouldn't even stand to have any chance in the BTC world because you're fundamentally an idiot.
What are you being sued for?
Because I called him a liar, a fraud, and a moron.
So libel?
Yeah.
Yes.
You being sued for libel?
Yeah. By Satoshi Nakamoto.
Which is a crime in the UK where they both reside, and
I get it.
It is what it is.
But it's not. I have not committed a crime. I've told truth.
Well, it's
not the truth.
It
is the
truth.
Okay, to call somebody a fraud is to say they have engaged in fraud. There is an article on Bitcoin Magazine written by Jameson Lopp factually documenting multiple instances of fraud that Craig Wright has gotten. Things he has said that were untrue, that he was caught in with factual evidence showing they were untrue.
Fraud is a legal status. I don't know if Craig has been convicted of fraud anywhere. And if he has not been convicted of fraud, then he is not legally a fraud, because fraud is a legal term.
And Hotep, here's the reality.
Fraud is just a word.
Here's the reality. Craig Wright isn't asking for money. Craig Wright isn't raising money. He's not asking for anything. The irony is that all the people that are on Peter McCormack's podcast in the cryptocurrency world are raising money for an idea that isn't implemented, that are building concepts that aren't proven to be true.
What are you even
Craig
fucking
Wright
going on about?
Isn't actually defrauding anybody. He just is saying, "Oh, I happen to create Bitcoin. Oh, but Peter doesn't like it because he doesn't fit the mold of Satoshi." And Peter, I wish that you lived in the United States. I wish you lived in the United States, that you weren't getting sued for libel.
Well, Connor, you said that he's not suing for money, but Peter said he's suing for 100K. So what's
he's suing me for 100K.
He has way more. 100K is a drop in the bucket to Craig Wright.
That would not be fraud. Again, like at the end of their case, no one will be deemed a fraud. The question is who has been defrauded? Which to defraud is to lie for the sake of earning money from people. And I don't see Craig having done that. In fact,
he raised money, founded a company, is trying to patent all kinds of stuff. Which, if you actually look at the patent, is prior history. Hold on, Kurt. Hold on. He's trying to build up this suite of patents. Which, if you actually look at a lot of them, most of them are prior history, so they're invalid. And he's probably trying to spin all of this off and sell it before these patents are invalidated. That is fraud. He is perpetuating the lie. He is Satoshi for a specific economic end.
If he's convicted of fraud for that, then you can legally call him a fraud. But until he has been convicted of fraud, it is libel in the UK to fraud, and that's the entire conversation.
I'm in the UK. I'm in the UK right now. He's a fraud. Sue me.
Hotep, I'll give you the alternate history. The man who created Bitcoin, like Odysseus, went off and came back to Ithaca disguised as a beggar, and now all of the suitors are threatened by the beggar that's in Ithaca.
Stop
and what's actually happening is
bollocks, mate. Stop talking stupid
and now what's happening is everyone is so threatened by the idea that someone has patented all of the ideas of this blockchain space so that you have to use this one global chain of Bitcoin like Satoshi always wanted. And they're so threatened by this man that they're just going to make up things and attack his character. And then when we talk about the technology of BSV, they're going to attack his character instead of focusing on the technology.
If
there is a history
having the conversation,
3 hours
marketable information. The fact that this podcast is happening is because Craig is a threat. Craig is signaling something that is actually threatening.
Craig is not a threat.
Then then nobody talks about things that are not threats. It wouldn't be worth anybody's bandwidth at all.
So then I'm a threat to Craig Wright.
Kurt, this podcast, I came on this podcast because I started following Hotep after his appearance on Joe Rogan, and he seems like a straight up dude, and he wants to wrap his head around this shit. I'm here to help him do that. I don't give a
Thank you, Shinobi. I appreciate that, bro.
But there'd be no conversation to have if Craig Wright did not have something that was a threat to something else. If Craig Wright was inconsequential, much the same as, pick any of the other 2,000 blockchains that nobody talks about, then it wouldn't be worth the conversation. If Craig Wright is so inconsequential, then why is he ever worth talking about? And yet, we've been talking about him for 3 hours, but the world's been talking about him for 4.5 years at this point.
You guys have been talking about him for 3 hours. Me, maybe the last 10 minutes, and I spent the rest of the time talking tech.
Yeah, Shinobi, I appreciate it. I think you did do that. And the last thing I'll say, because again, it would be so much easier for me to not be attacked by everyone in the chat for saying these things about Craig Wright, but I'm going to say them because they're the truth. Craig Wright was the first person to come out and say, hey, by the way, this scripting language that none of you guys understood is Turing complete, and it can perform Turing complete computation, of which
but that's
people have
incorrect.
That's
factually incorrect.
It's factually true.
Szabo was laughing in his face when he said that.
Yeah, because he doesn't understand the scripting language.
Nobody had heard that before, and I believe that has been proven by peer-reviewed academic papers.
Peter, there is a compiler that you can use on BSV, because you can use all the opcodes on BSV to create Turing complete programs and run them on top of Bitcoin SV, because Bitcoin itself is Turing complete, like Forth.
Shinobi, take this one, man.
Sorry?
I'm just telling
Shinobi. No, what you can do is you can kind of sort of hackily emulate stuff by spamming op returns and just having an incredibly slow emulation of something. There is no Turing completeness in it. There is no ability for something to execute unbounded in the span of a transaction or a script. There's the ability to take individual scripts and hack them together so they kind of sort of work like that. Those are absolutely not the same thing. And this is just another example of Craig trying to take confusing terminologies and concepts from computer science and just throw them around and seem authoritative to people who don't understand these things.
So is Bitcoin Turing complete or not?
No.
No.
It's not.
No.
But what you just described is it kind of can do loops, but not the way I want it to.
A program is the script in the transaction. You cannot put a Turing complete program into a single script.
Is Forth Turing complete?
Oh my God, dude.
Is Forth Turing complete? Yes or no?
Forth executes on a computer, not a virtual machine with a 10-second compute cycle with a discrete limitation on the size of programs. You are not comparing things that make sense to compare.
Can you compute any number in Forth, and can you compute any number in Bitcoin?
Hey fellas, let's go into closing arguments. We're gonna just your closing statements. We're gonna start with Team BSV because BTC open, so you guys get to close the show. BTC, you get to close the show. We're going to start with BSV closing arguments. We'll start with Kurt.
I just want to say that the thing that's made itself clear to me with everybody here is that we all actually really care about Bitcoin, and we disagree on the definitions of what Bitcoin is, but I think it's crystal clear that we all really care passionately about how Bitcoin can give value to people. And I've heard that from every one of us is that we're looking at the person that needs Bitcoin and we're trying to get it to them. And I would like to see the general toxicity, like you said, Hotep. I'd like to see that sort of general toxicity and the assumption of ill will between all of us. It maybe dissipate and say, you know what? We disagree on how to get there, but we want to see people succeed. And from the BSV standpoint, the reason that I'm a big blocker and the reason I've always been a big blocker and why I've ended up in the BSV camp is that I believe that a tool that gives people the ability to create value on chain and sell it out to the real economy in a limitless regard is the thing that has more value. I've been a Bitcoiner since 2012. So buying Bitcoin and letting it accrue value in my pocket is something that, that's great. I benefited from that. But that's not something that I think can happen just forever, that everybody can just jump in and that value can spill from the economy into Bitcoin forever. I believe that the people of Bitcoin need to create businesses and create value to sell to the external economy. And I believe that happens best with big blocks. And I believe that the best implementation of big block Bitcoin is BSV because it believes fundamentally that Bitcoin works. And the other thing that I want to say about it is that, again, just for the sake of experimentation, See if Bitcoin worked in its simplest implementation. There's just no reason not to. And I understand all the reasons why it's a threat to whatever else, it's a threat to the marketplace, or it's, you know, it's a threat to the people that have said that a 2 megabyte block or an 8 megabyte block or a 32 megabyte block will fracture Bitcoin to death, that it'll fall apart. We've proven that it does not collapse the way that the doomsday sayers said that it would collapse the network. And therefore, I believe that we should allow people to in good faith, show up to the plate and swing the bat absolutely as hard as they can to try to create that value and give that value back out to the economy with Bitcoin SV.
Connor, you rubbing the clock?
Yeah. Well, I'll just first say, Hotep, thanks for doing this. This is a great thing for you to put on, and I'll apologize if I interrupted or whatever else to everybody involved. I am very passionate about this. Like I honestly am, and I recognize that, and I probably get carried away. I will say, you know, generally, to me, Bitcoin introduced something very important. It took power out of money. Money has always been, there's always been power in money that's centrally controlled. Bitcoin removed that power. I'm passionate about Bitcoin SV because it actually does remove the power from any centralized group of people. Any other fork of Bitcoin and every other cryptocurrency in some way, shape, or form does not guarantee that if you put money away, it'll not be debased by some central third party. It also means that any person can transact with each other peer-to-peer at a low cost. You know, Satoshi again wrote that microtransactions are one of the best use cases for Bitcoin. BTC does not allow use of microtransactions. We can build all new types of economies and applications with microtransactions on Bitcoin. And lastly, you know, it also means that any person can start a company, a large scale company. This is an unprecedented time in humanity's history. It means that we can actually allow any kid in Africa to build large data service applications without having to buy a server farm. This is the promise of Bitcoin, and allows them to monetize what they're doing. You know, look, Bitcoin SV is, like Kurt just mentioned, as I hoped to express during this entire thing, was just what was originally created. That's all it is. It's nothing different. It's nothing fancy, or we don't even need to talk about all these fancy scaling problems. And you can put thousands of transactions on chain today for a very low cost, because Bitcoin SV is everything that Satoshi created in 2008 and 2009. And it's all it's going to be moving forward. And I'll just say thanks to everyone for doing this.
Shinobi, you're up. What's up, man?
Well, I mean, you know, thanks for having me on, and I get your sentiment towards, you know, peaceful coexistence, but I see bullshit, I call bullshit, and I don't give a fuck about anything else besides that. Like, you know, I made a lot of arguments, and they might have got, you know, kind of a lot to follow and dense, and, you know, I know a couple times I kind of had connection issues, so I might have dropped out in the middle, but, you know, don't just blindly believe what I say any more than what they say. Think about it. Actually go through and analyze shit yourself, because this is all fucking complicated shit, man. Like, you know, you think that what's happening now is some new thing. This same shit happened back in the 80s when they built the internet, man. Like, you think TCP/IP was the only kid on the block? Every fucking company in the space trying to get into the internet wanted to do their own protocol, their own design. There were literally fist fights in fucking rooms full of nerds over this shit. This is what happens because we're building the foundational thing that we're trying to move forward from for the next few generations. Take your time, think shit through, and don't just go to the best sounding sound bites. Like, actually, if somebody's only giving you sound bites and they aren't giving you long arguments that make your head hurt or get hard to follow at some point, you're probably listening to a scammer. So, like, seriously, you should be as fucking skeptical in this space as you are in the fucking most fucked up part of the world. Turn your paranoia switch on.
Awesome. We're going to close the show. My man, Peter. Peter, what you got?
All right. Firstly, something funny, Hotep. You wouldn't have known this. Me and Brian, Shinobi, we were at war, like 8 months ago, was it?
This is less. I'd say like 6.
Yeah, like we fucking went at each other. We didn't understand. I think one of the things, we didn't understand each other. And like I was doing some shit, he was doing, and And now we've kind of come to understand each other. So the fact that we're even doing this together is quite funny. And my second one I want to paint, like the most annoying thing is I've come out of this really liking you, Kurt. And it's really like fucking annoys me because I want to just call you an egghead and hate you, but I actually come out of this really liking you. I'm sorry, Connor. I still think you're a moron.
That's fine.
The reality is of all this stuff is that like most of these conversations, they just don't fucking matter. And I'm never going to learn this tech shit because I want to be with like my guys, like my friends who don't care about this shit. They're like, when should I buy this? What should I buy? Am I going to make some fucking money? That's all they fucking care about. So I leave all the intelligent, smart shit to Shinobi, and I'm just going to talk to other people about that. The reality is Bitcoin is king. Like you can do what the fuck you want with BSV. It's dead. It's already dead. The market's voted. It's dead. You're going to put your time at it. It's dead. The price is going to die. It's the only thing keeping it afloat is Calvin's money. That's literally it. Add to that, you are supporting a bunch of people who are liars, frauds, and morons. Craig Wright is a fucking liar, and he's a fraud, and he's a moron. He's not Satoshi. He can come at me into the fucking UK. He can take me to court. He can come with his fucking billions of dollars. I don't give a shit. Come at me. Sue me. I don't give a fuck. You're still a liar. You're still a fraud. You're still a moron. The fact that you guys can't even see all the evidence every fucking time he's lied, like we're talking hundreds of times he's lied, submitted fraudulent documents, and you like make excuses for that shit. You literally have no answer for the fact that I myself was able to prove something he uploaded to a site. I went through the metadata myself and proved it was another lie, and you guys have no answer for that. You have no answer for his lies. You just cloud over it. It's fucking disgrace, man. You should get your shit together. You should look in the mirror. You should grow a pair of bollocks, and you should ditch that guy.
Awesome. Thank you. I knew he was going to end it with fire. That's why I did.
Boom. And look, we're going to hang out in New York, yeah?
Yeah, hit me up when you get out here.
All right.
We'll make that happen.
We'll do that. All right.
Yo, shout out to everybody with the super chat. Coin Alchemist. Peter, he's literally reading from the white paper. Coin Alchemist, you put your children's well-being at risk for popularity. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Awesome stream. I'm going to have to sit back and watch all 3 hours to soak all this stuff in. Everybody, y'all have a good night, man.
All right.
Cheers.